Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Innovations in Pharma, hosted by Ubik Webinars. My name is Vlad Karoris and I will be the moderator today. It's fascinating how fast new trends and technologies are evolving these days. Given such dynamics, pharmaceutical companies are always responding to rapid developments and challenges. The pharma industry is a large and diverse industry and is experiencing continuous growth. It's a strategic sector and one that is currently in a historical phase as it engages in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we will discuss some of the recent popular trends in pharma, such as blockchain in supply chain, 3D printing of medicine, digital therapeutics, regulation in the EU, digital mental health, and the relationship between pharma companies and startups. Before introducing the agenda and speakers, I would like to offer you, dear participants, a possible cooperation with Ubik Webinars. Does your company want to organize a professional webinar to create new business partnerships or to find new clients or just to discuss important topics? Do not hesitate to contact us on operations@ubikwebinars.com and we will organize a professional webinar for you. Great, let's go now over the agenda and housekeeping rules. In the meantime, please answer the questions in the poll, which I will launch now in this moment, to know more about our audience today. We want to make this webinar very interactive, so we will use the poll feature often today. Just a detail, the polls are visible only for our Zoom participants. We have 6 speakers today, and the webinar will open Alexandru Popa, who is Digital Transformation Lead at MSD, and he will speak about blockchain in supply chain. After that, Mrs. Atheer Awad from University College London will show us innovative technology of 3D printing of medicine. We will continue with the digital therapeutics session, where firstly, Smit Patel from Digital Medicine Society will speak about reshaping health with digital therapeutics. After him, Mr. Alessandro Ferri from Advice Pharma will share his knowledge about development and clinical evaluation of digital therapeutics in EU. And this session will close Mrs. Malika Bouazzaoui with the topic of digital mental health. The last but not least will speak Mr. Vincent Galand from Digital Pharma Lab and Health Innovation Coalition, and he will cover the topic about the relationship between pharma companies and startups. I hope you will be able to stay with us until the end, as we will have a short time for additional questions and answers from the audience after all those presentations. When it comes to housekeeping rules, if you have any question, please write it to the Q&A box on your Zoom control panel. The speaker will answer the question after presentation. Use the chat only for comments, please. The chat can use for questions our YouTube participants. If you want to speak about us on social media, please do not forget to use the hashtag #UbikWebinars. Now we can see the results of our short survey. So I will just end the polling and share the results. So the first question was, which continent do you live in? So we can see that the majority of our participants are from Europe, 64%, then from Asia, 25%, from North America, and also from Africa. And which pharma trend would you like to learn more about? So we can see that majority is interested in digital health and digital therapeutics, but also topics such as artificial intelligence, smart pills, precision medicine are very of your interest. Thank you very much for these answers. And now it's time to present our first speaker, Alexandru Popa. Alex is on mission in his role as Digital Transformation Lead at MSD to build blockchain capabilities and ecosystem to enable continuous, reciprocal, and friction-free flow of information with trading partners, optimizing product flow for patient and enterprise metrics, setting the right foundation to enable the future, one block at a time. Thank you very much, Alexandru, for being with us here today, and you can start with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction, and also thanks for hosting this event. Just allow me a couple of moments to share my presentation.
Sure.
And I would like also to thank to all of our audience today for your time. I hope this event will bring you new insights, and you will, after the event, you will be richer in terms of information wise. So no further ado, I'm just going to talk today about blockchain, specifically going to focus on a use case on fighting counterfeit drugs. Why is that? If I would be to ask you what is the most counterfeit good today in the world, maybe a lot of you would say it will be luxury brands. Some of you would say shoes, electronic devices. But the reality is, in terms of value, the most counterfeit goods today are drugs and specifically medicine. In terms of the global value that is lost due to counterfeit. Quick run throughout the agenda. I'm going to quickly introduce you what blockchain is, explain in very simple terms, and especially more focused what we are leveraging in the pharma business. Then going to present you a use case and a project that we run in Hong Kong, with plans to expand to all AP region and ultimately also in other parts of the world. Going to introduce a dual factor authentication method, which we consider as security level 2. I'm going to talk a bit about that as well. Then going to take you on a journey to show where this is going. So once you implement a use case, how do we plan to scale? What is going to happen next? And going a bit down on the value streams in terms of patients and customers. And then I'm going to talk a bit about a couple of policy and regulatory hurdles, and also a couple of challenges that we face in implementing blockchain. So why blockchain? What is blockchain? If we look what I have here and what I'm showing you, it's a multi-party business network in the traditional sense of looking into it, is how businesses operate to date. So I pick obviously as a showcase couple of participants in a pharma supply chain, specifically. What is happening today as goods, in our case drugs, are passing throughout the supply chain, they are moved from one party to another. So we have the manufacturer, we have the distributors, we have the hospitals, we have the healthcare practitioners, and ultimately patients and an insurance company. As goods and information is passing today in this business network, it goes from one to another. This system has been proved, right? It's maintaining ledgers as the goods and information passes throughout the network. Each and every participant in the business network will need to update their own ledgers. This is a process that is proven, has been around since people are starting doing business together, and the ledger is the key core of a business, right? How you register these transactions. And if we look, one of the oldest forms of written in the Sumer plaques, right? It's are turned out to be, so the archaeologists are claiming they are ledgers, right? So basically the claim is that ledgers and writing was invented because it needed to keep track of assets moving from one part to another. Now, this process has been around for so long, but it's very inefficient if we look at it. As more complex your business is, because each and every one of the participants have to update their own ledger. It's a lot of effort to synchronize the ledgers in scattered systems, legacy systems. Now, it's very expensive. And why I say it's very expensive, if we look into regulated industries, if we look into pharma specifically, there are departments where they estimate up to 20% of their time it's lost on making sure either that you are compliant with regulatory authorities, or you are preparing yourself for being compliant. So making sure that you would pass the audits. If you translate time into money, 20% of the time lost on that means a lot of money that are you can say, lost. And it's very vulnerable. Why I say it's vulnerable, it's the ledgers and these data entry points are subject to malicious attacks from outside. We had a case, just want to give you an example. It happened, I think, in 2017, WannaCry attack. Merck was a victim at the time, collateral victim. We weren't triggered, but for 3 weeks, the company was almost paralyzed. And the examples can go on forever. Now, bringing blockchain into the picture, what blockchain is, right? If you look on the abstract level, blockchain is a common ledger. It brings in a couple of attributes, consensus. So what does consensus mean? It means that the way transaction gets validated, it's based on a smart contract. So on specific business rules, and by agreement, how a transaction reaches finality, it's embedded in the code of the system. Another attribute is provenance. So having the common ledger where the goods and transactions are written in a common ledger, you can track at any time by checking the ledger at what point, what participant owned that information or the good during its life cycle. You can track, for example, if I'm a patient, I can track all the way to the manufacturer and see how my product passed and if it passed throughout all the nodes in a network. Immutability, this is a core attribute of the blockchain. So this is tamper proof. So nobody can tamper or change transactions. You have your ledger cannot be modified. It's secure also. It's not subject to malicious attacks. It cannot be hacked. And then ultimately we have finality, which is the ledger would be your ultimate source of truth. Me as a regulatory authority, instead of going and auditing all of the participants, I have access to the common ledger and I can extract the business rules or the compliancy of each of the participants by having access to the common ledger. Couple of questions that I get, or one of the questions that I get when I'm talking about the finality is it's not really public. The fact is, if there are business transactions that needs to be hidden, for example, from participant A, which can be a logistic distributor, and a hospital pharmacy in terms of, for example, setting prices, this can be hidden by appealing to what we call privacy services. So some transactions, if all the participants agreed upon, can be hidden one from another if you have something confidential to share on the ledger. Now, what we see with blockchain, right? I think, as we can all observe around, blockchain hype cycle is typically tied in with cryptocurrencies. So there was a boom in 2016, 2017, where if you look at Bitcoin price and the cryptocurrency market, it brought for the first time blockchain also as a technology on the mainstream. And then companies, financial industry also started to really look into blockchain, how can be used and put to work for business benefit. And there were a couple of challenges of the time. Everybody had to start small. There was no consortiums in place, no regulations. People didn't really know how to approach it. But now what we can see in terms of corporate business use, the hype cycle is going a bit down the curve, and tangible use cases are starting to materialize. In 2017, 2018, we had a lot of POCs in the industries, but now today we see a lot of those POCs and pilots went to production. I would just mention here, for example, Walmart. So Walmart today is tracking 25 of their products from the farmer's plantation or farm to the customer plate. So people are able to see how the food, for example, mangoes, they get from the Mexico plantation till the store. In case of a foodborne illness, it is very easy for Walmart to detect where that infection came from what exact batch of food, regardless that is like, for example, pork meat from China. They are able to track exactly from what farm that infested batch of meat is coming from, and they can remove it from their supply chain very fast, whereas in the past it would take weeks, and even that it was a manual process. They could not really figure it out, so you end up not knowing from what batch or from what farm your meat is coming. You will have to throw away and waste all of the poor meat, basically, right, in case of these events. However, as I said, blockchain is a team sport. So without collaboration and without interoperability, you can't really get the benefits. If I don't have, as I showed you in the first slide, in the second slide, sorry, all the participants in a blockchain network, all the participants in a business network joining the network, then it's very likely that you would really take benefit of blockchain attributes. In terms of healthcare, we see a lot of public consortium that are formed and are still forming, working together towards this common goal. So I'm just going to give you some example. It's Pharma Ledger. I'm going to talk a bit later about it. Blockchain Consensus Board, IOP Blockchain Summit. Also health authorities and government authorities are also starting to join and start to create regulations around blockchain ecosystems. As I said, I'm going to pick a use case, and one of the first use cases that that we have now, it's live in the pharma industry and has the highest value. It's fighting counterfeit drugs. The problem today with counterfeit drugs entering the market is that we see it increasing over time. As a result, the brand of the company suffers, and that leads to loss in terms of revenue. But the biggest problem is not only that. The biggest problem is that the patient's life may be threatened. If you're taking a drug that is not a legitimate drug, you don't really know what's into it. It might have tremendous adverse events, and it can lead to a lot of damage. In Europe today, 27 billion is lost per year. The pharma industry is losing in terms of revenue. The World Health Organization is estimated that 1 out of 3 medicines sold worldwide are illegitimate. This doesn't mean necessarily that they are counterfeit, but they are drugs that get to the patients even though they are not supposed to. So it's either wrong allocation of prescription, it's either expired drugs that expire, drugs that are subject to recalls. So it's a big problem, and we really believe blockchain can relieve it today. If you look how commerce is evolving, especially now with the pandemic and the lockdowns, e-commerce becomes a gateway. When you have online pharmacies, it's very hard to have controls, too much control in place. So basically anyone can set up some sort of commercial business online, selling medicine or healthcare products. You don't really know what they are actually selling. And this is spreading with a tremendous rate of 20% each year. And then another challenge is, as the government authorities are seeing these problems, they are imposing that product traceability. So regulators are tightening the grip, and they would like to have regulation to enforce people's safety. So the industry has to react to all of this. What we are doing specifically. So I picked an example, one of the use cases and one of the projects ongoing in Hong Kong. What happened in Hong Kong? There was a lot of publicity that went all over the AP region. In mid-2019, a series of reports emerged that clinics were dispensing illegitimate HPV vaccines to patients. So basically fake products. Part of those fake products were also MSD products, and it was a big scandal also in the media. I believe, if I remember correctly, none of the patients had severe damage, but they still needed attention, and they still needed checks and observation by physicians. To stop all of that, we work with Zulik Pharma. So Zulik Pharma, it's one of the largest distributors of medicines and kind of drugs in Asia Pacific, and we work with them to impose a blockchain-based drug authentication solution that allows the patient and the healthcare practitioners to check if a drug is illegitimate or not. So using the serialization, the 2D barcode on the pack of the drugs, and using a smartphone, the patients are able to scan today the pack, and they would be able to see if that's a legitimate drug imported by an authorized distributor. So as you can see, we have a couple of nodes. It's the MSD node, Zulik node, and then we work with clinics. What is still on the roadmap, and we are working on that. It's integrate more and more clinics to take benefit of this. Today we have one out of 4 clinics in Hong Kong are having this and are using the application, and they can be detected as nodes in the network. What this produces, it's also a variety of data analytics. We use Power BI to analyze and understand also the demographics, understand the consumption. For the clinics, also the benefits is, and for Zulik, and for us, that we create also by this inventory visibility, so it's very easy to plan and understand also the demographics. So where are the regions, what are the pharmacies that are selling more, understand also a bit the behavior of the consumer, right? We are also able to track and see how many fake drugs are detected, how many obviously legitimate scans are, what's the number of total scans. So there are all sorts of KPIs that we are leveraging, and we keep on adding to that. Another pilot also within the security and traceability area. This one we run in US. We work with Walmart and IBM. So just to mention here, by 2023, for example, the US government, the FDA, it's a government regulatory authority when it comes to food and drugs, the Food and Drug Administration. They are imposing that all drugs prescription drugs have to be tracked exactly for this reason, to increase the safety of the patient. This act is called the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, and we run a pilot using blockchain technology that was validated by FDA to prove that the technology is a right fit. Blockchain is the right fit to use for this use case. All right, so we talk a bit how you can find counterfeit and make sure you track the provenance of pharmaceutical goods. But then the question comes, what does it happen when you have malicious participants within a supply chain? So you have, even though it's very rarely to happen, because we have contractual agreements in place and we trust our partners, but alongside the supply chain, so for example, in the distribution part, there still might be entry points where falsified drugs get in, but not only the drugs are falsified, obviously the pack can be falsified. So somebody can falsify or counterfeit the 2D barcode, and then you still ingest, or the patient hands might get an illegitimate product. So in order to fight this, we are implementing something what we call internally digital fingerprinting, and this implies like level 2 of security. Is the same principle as money have imposed today. So if you put your hands in your pockets, most of you would have dollars or euros or Japanese yen or whatever. The idea is that on these bills you will have dual factor authentication security measures. So if you look at the dollar, just to give you an example, you have security ribbons, you have color shifting ink, you have this special paper that, for example, on the edges will be a bit taller, like a relief. We try to do the same with the packs. So the serial numbers on the packs that are getting scanned, we use different technologies. One of them is inkjet printing that would able to detect if what you are scanning it's a legitimate pack. So being sure that whoever scans gets a drug that was printed by a Merck printer on the pack and not by a malicious party. Now, quick intro into the levels. As I was telling, this is summarizing what I was saying so far. So we have the GTIN verification. These are the different levels. Then we have, on top of it, we can add digital fingerprinting. So this would be level 2 of security. Now, all of this, if you think about it, if you allow someone to scan the 2D barcode, why not have more into it? Right. So we talk about having also the business intelligence part of it. So the status check and data collaboration. And then ultimately, you have the full traceability check. But where this is going, so if we allow the patients to check the legitimacy of the drug, why not have more on top of it? So we plan also to have as building blocks later on as use cases, and we are already doing in some parts of the world, is to have the electronic patient information. So instead of having the paper, by also scanning the 2D barcode, the patient also can get the prescription, right? The product information of that product in real time in their language. Now, if we do that, why now allow also the patient to have, as we see today, pharma industry in general is not starting not to produce or to look into things, not just producing pills, but providing a whole experience around your treatment, around the pill. So why not have also a course completion reminder, for example, for vaccination when you need to take your second dose? Why not have, and this is also what we are doing in Canada, UK, and US, we have a so-called order to cash functions where we have an automatic replenishment of prescription drugs. And as we can see, why not have vaccination passports also on top of it, based on, so when someone would take a COVID-19 vaccine, for example, just giving you an example, they would scan the box, they make sure it's an authentic before the doctor gives them the shot. But then in the same time, they would also, it would be synced, the shot that they take, with the vaccination passport. And then obviously you can have insurance claims. For clinics, for pharmacies, obviously there's a lot of benefit also in terms of you can have auto replenishment, you can see when you run out of the stock, improve shelf life monitoring, that means fewer expired products, authenticity as well, and ultimately, but this is a bit of a longer journey, automatic electronic health records and drug purchase. As I said, we start with anti-counterfeiting. Typically, the strategy is to start with the highest producing value use case, and then on top of it, build all these use cases across the value chain. So once you have the authenticity check, then you can have also the electronic product information. Batch recalls, it's very easy to detect if a batch is subject to recall, where that batch is and what the medicines of that specific batch are. So you are able to recall them in hours rather than 2 weeks. Right now, this is a manual process, and it provides a lot of headaches. We can have also on top of it adverse events, so allowing patients to report adverse events also by scanning and directing them to a page where they can also report the adverse events. And then electronic health records, finished good traceability, clinical decision support system, ultimately leading to a fully blockchain-enabled healthcare value chain. Couple of policy and regulatory hurdles. So these are also the challenges that we are facing. So you have to keep in mind blockchain is still an exploratory in healthcare. Most of the use cases are still in POC or pilot phases. We need to hear more versus a need to have. We are learning because the most advanced today experience, the first use cases emerge in the finance, insurance, IT and telecom industries, and then follow these industries. Pharma, I think it's leveraging the most blockchain as it today. And then there is a lot of education when it comes with the ecosystem players. So as I was saying, interoperability, it's missing. So a lot of effort is spent on trying to convince the ecosystem players to join the network. And for that, you need to show them, put them in their shoes, educate them what blockchain is, and show them what is in it for me. This is a natural question that either I'm an individual or I'm a business, wherever I'm proposed to do something or asked to do something, subconsciously, the questions that I will have in my head is, okay, I'm doing this, but what is in it for me? So we are trying also to answer these questions, which sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's a bit of a challenge. But the industry is moving towards that direction. Just to give you an example of an initiative, it's Pharma Ledger. So today we are like 29 members. It's a lot of it's academia, IT, but mostly big pharma companies. This is an initiative backed by European Union under the Innovative Medicine Initiative, and it's supposed to run until 2023. We are doing a lot of pilots and use cases developed under Pharma Ledger consortium, working with Novartis, Pfizer, Bayer, Novo Nordics, AbbVie, and GSK, and so on to deliver on blockchain use cases. Security and traceability is one of the use cases that is also emerging on the Pharma Ledger, but not only this, it's a bunch of other use cases. I would recommend you, we don't have too much time to go throughout it, but Google Pharma Ledger and you can find a lot of information. That was it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm happy to get any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much, Alexandru, for a very informative presentation and explaining us the blockchain in supply chain. We have actually 0 minutes, but we will ask a few questions. So Coralie is asking, do you expect more co-development from your partner, like you give the example with Pharma Ledger?
Yes. So as of now, in terms of if you are, so I hope the question refers to partners in terms of other pharma companies, which it's very interesting because even though we are competitors, we work on these use cases as an open source community. So basically, everybody is contributing with development, contributing with building the use cases, contributing with patient advisory boards, contributing and working together towards the governance. And it's great to see. It's one of the few areas where we started to really collaborate and have this super friendly and open atmosphere. And this is happening also with digital biomarkers. Big companies are starting to cooperate, and it's happening in a couple of other areas. But what I can tell you in the blockchain, it's great because we all realize this, by joining forces together and creating these ecosystems is the only way we can take benefits of blockchain without being selfish or thinking about self-interest by any means.
Thank you for your answer. Also, I would like to ask you, when it comes to this 2D data metrics, does it require a special scanner, or is it possible to access also by a public, by a normal smartphone camera?
It can be done with a smartphone camera as well. So nothing is required. That makes it much easier for the ecosystem participants to do it. We don't require, obviously, a lot of changings on the current legacy systems in terms of changing their scanners or anything like that. So it can be done easily with a normal smartphone.
Okay, thank you very much. So the time is over. We have to move now to the second speaker. Thank you again for your presentation and accepting the invitation to speak. So
thank you also. And if any of you have any sorts of question, here's my contact. Drop me an email. Thank you very much, and we'll stay in touch.
Thank you again. So now it's time to move on and to introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Atheer Awad. She received her bachelor's degree in pharmacy from Applied Science University in Jordan. She then pursued a Master of Science in Pharmaceutics at University College of London, where her research was aimed at exploring the potential of 3D printing for the formulation of abuse, deterrent, and alcohol-resistant formulations. More recently, she completed a PhD in pharmaceutics at the same institution where her research is focused on fabricating drug delivery systems and implantable devices using 3D printing. Currently, Atheer is working as a research fellow at UCL School of Pharmacy, looking into using 3D printing to improve colonic drug delivery. Thank you very much, Atheer, for being with us today, and you can start to share your screen and start with your presentation.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. Just to make sure, can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the clinical applications of 3D printed medicines. Before I start, actually, I think we have a small poll that I'd like to run, if that's okay. Okay.
Sure, it's okay.
Thank you. So these are simply some general questions that if you could please answer them. There is really no right or wrong answers. They're just simply to know what you as audience think of 3D printing and pharma in general. So I guess I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we can carry on with the presentation. So for the first question, where do you see 3D printing of medicines being applied? And then which patient group would benefit the most from 3D printing of medicines in your opinion? And then finally, currently there is only one 3D printed medication that has been approved by the FDA. What do you think is the main reason for the lack of more approved 3D printed medicines? Right, I think if everyone's happy, we can show the results of the poll, if that's okay.
Just the last second, I think, because they are voting now,
Okay.
many of them. So just the last 3 seconds. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Right. So I can see the majority think that 3D printing could mainly be used for personalization of doses. Then I think the second one would be for preclinical and clinical studies, which is sort of true. Interestingly, actually, the approved 3D printed medicines is for neither of those applications. It was actually for the mass manufacturing of medicines, simply because the current medication can't be created with the same characteristics if it was created using normal manufacturing techniques. In terms of patient groups, I can see that the majority think it's for rare diseases and chronic conditions. But as you're going to see in this presentation, that even children and elderly can majorly benefit from these technologies. And I can see for the last question that most of you think that it's due to the lack of pharmaceutical 3D printers that comply with GMP requirements, which I do agree with you. I think that is a major hurdle, and a lot of companies are working on that at the moment. So thank you for sharing your opinions. I think we can carry on with the presentation. So before I start with my presentation, I'm just going to give you a quick background about the manufacturing of medicines. So currently, most medicines are manufactured in a mass form, where we have thousands of tablets with discrete dose strengths and fixed shapes, size, and drug release properties. Which means what we're doing is that we're treating all patients as one size fits all. However, this approach is not the best, because results have shown that only 30 to 60% of those medicines are actually efficacious in patients. And that's due to multiple reasons, because we as people are different. We're different in age, gender, ethnicity, comorbidities, body type, and the polypharmacy and of the medications we're on. And so medications tend to have different effects in different people. And so there is now a great shift towards the personalization of medications, which means we want to give each patient an individual dose that's based on the individual characteristic of that patient. And that's where the role of 3D printed medicines come, or what we like to call printlets. And so why is 3D printing beneficial for a personalized approach? That's mainly due to 4 motivations. The first one would be due to the dose flexibility that we can get with 3D printing. So currently, as I mentioned, medications are mass produced, and that means they're produced in fixed strengths. So if we require a certain dose that's not available in the market, what we tend to do is that we split those tablets, or we crush them to give the patient the right dose that they need. However, this approach is full of errors, and we don't often get the dose that we are targeting. And with 3D printing, to modify the dose, that can be easily done by controlling the printlet size or shape, or the printlet's infill, which means how much it's full of material inside the shell of the tablets. And both of these can simply be changed by altering the 3D design of the tablets. So you don't need to change your tool or your 3D printer or the way you're manufacturing those tablets, which makes it much easier and much quicker to obtain flexible doses. The second motivation is that we can create patient-centered designs, which means we have the choice of selecting the shape, the size, the color, the flavor, or even the formulation type. And as we're going to see in this presentation, patients tend to have preference for certain shapes or flavors or even sizes over others. And so that could greatly affect the way they adhere to treatments plan and their willingness to actually take these medications, which eventually affects how efficacious the treatment is going to be. 3D printing also allows us to create multi-drug combinations, which are called polypoles. And so a lot of patients, especially the elderly, suffer from multiple chronic diseases, and they often are put on multiple medications, which in some cases could probably even reach up to more than 28 different medications. So it's really hard for these patients to stick to the treatment plan or remember which medications they've taken or they haven't taken. And so with 3D printing, you can combine several of these medications into single dosage forms. That means we are reducing the number of intakes, making it easier for the patients to remember which medications they're supposed to take and which ones they haven't taken yet. So it lessens the burden on these patients. And finally, with 3D printing, you can create unique drug release profiles. And that could be done in different ways. For instance, if we look at the left, so this is a polypole with 6 different drugs. And here, depending on the arrangement of the drugs in the different layers, we can modify the way the drug gives action in the body. So for instance, the layers that are on the surfaces are more exposed to the gastric fluids, and they will often give a faster effect compared to those that are chewed in the middle. On the right-hand side, these are very small pellets or granules that are 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter in size. However, they're composed of 2 different drugs that have different actions in the body. For instance, the green drug gives a very extended and slow effect in the body, whereas the blue one gives a fast releasing effect. And so because they're quite small, you can even dose these to even pediatric patients. So making it quite a flexible technology in terms of what you can give your patients and how they can benefit from it. And so how we can improve the patient outcomes, this improvement is especially seen in pediatric and geriatric patients or those on complex treatment regimes. And so by giving them tailored dosage forms, we essentially improve the adherence of these patients to the treatment. We reduce the unwanted side effects by giving the patients the exact doses that they require and need. And we improve the overall efficacy of the treatment. And so where do we see 3D printing being used? And that's going to be the focus of my presentation today. And I'm going to focus on 2 main aspects, which are the preclinical and clinical uses of 3D printing. For preclinical uses, we can rapid prototype formulations to suit our animal studies. For instance, if we have a different animal model or a different size of the animal, we can easily alter that dosage form so that it's suitable in terms of the dose and also the size, so that it can be given to the animal without needing any modification or any other intervention. In terms of clinical studies, we can see 3D printing having a lot of applications in early human studies, in the clinical trials, where we can personalize the dosage forms to meet the requirements of the study as the study progresses. And that's quite common in clinical studies, where you either need to change the dose that you're giving to the patient by increasing it as the study progresses, or if you need to do some sort of blinding to meet the needs of your study. And so if we look at the preclinical applications of 3D printing, this is an example of small capsules that are for rat administrations. So these capsules are less than 1 centimeter in length, and they were made with different materials. So for the first 2 materials, those were fast releasing materials. So they gave it an immediate action in the rat. The third one was more of a slow extended release, whereas the fourth one is a delayed release. And so you can see you can get all sort of formulations that you need for your study. And at the same time, you can make them suitable enough to meet the requirements of your animal model, which in this case was a rat model, where you can also change the thickness as well as the shape of those capsules that you are administering. In terms of clinical applications, we're going to look at two different types of clinical applications. The first is how does 3D printing affect patient acceptability. So in the first study, we performed a patient acceptability study in adult patients where there were 10 different shapes of tablets in 4 different sizes. And they were given to adult patients, and the patients were asked to give a participant-reported outcome to inform us of which of these different printed tablets do they prefer in terms of picking, in terms of swallowing on a daily basis, and in terms of size. And so in terms of picking, there was a clear preference towards the disc, which is quite similar to the normal tablets that we normally take in our daily lives, followed by the torus or the donut shape, and then finally the cube shape. So in terms of picking, the patients found these 3 shapes to be the easiest to pick. In terms of swallowing acceptability, we realized that there's a high preference for the donut shape and the capsule shape in particular. In terms of daily dosing, there was a clear trend towards the capsule, which is again quite common in our daily use. And in terms of the maximum swallowable size, we found that 4 different shapes actually have preferences, which were the sphere, the torus, the capsule, and the heart shape, where in the case of the capsule, some patients even preferred swallowing all 4 different sizes. And so we can see that there is preference, and the preference depends on multiple factors. We performed another patient acceptability study, but this time in children. And this time we compared 4 different 3D printing technologies. The first one is called direct light processing, or DLP, which uses a light projector to convert like a liquid resin into a solid object through a process known as photopolymerization. The second one is selective laser sintering, or SLS, which uses a laser beam to sort of superficially glue powder particles together. And then the third one is semi-solid extrusion, which uses a paste or a gel in a syringe and heats it up to maximum of 60 degrees and extrudes it out of the syringe. And finally, fused deposition modeling, which is the most commonly used 3D printing technology that heats up a thin like filament, which is like a spaghetti if you want to compare it, and heats it through an orifice. Now, the common thing between all 4 and actually all 3D printing technologies is that they build up the objects in a layer by layer manner. However, as we can see in these 4 examples, the way these technologies do that is different. And so we asked children aged between 4 to 11 years to give us a visual to characterize these tablets and give us comments on their visual appearance, texture, and how they would imagine they'd be swallowed, and give us a preference between the 4 different technologies. And here we can see that all children preferred the DLP tablets over the other 3. And that's probably due to the DLP technology having the highest resolution compared to the other 3. And we saw that there was a similar trend even between boys and girls. And so we can see that that clearly affects the willingness of these children to take these medications. We also divided the data based on the children's ages, and we also saw a similar trend regardless of the age, where the children gave the most positive descriptions for the DLP printlets, whereas gave the most negative descriptions to the SSC or FDM technologies, which in general have a much lower resolution compared to DLP or even SLS. In terms of the different descriptions, out of the 4 technologies in the category of familiarity, we saw that the children found the SLS printlets to be the most familiar, and that's quite expected because they're powdery in nature and they probably related them to the tablets that are currently being used. Whereas the other 3 are more like plasticky in nature, or in the case of semi-solid extrusion, jelly in nature. In terms of the texture, taste, or appearance, the children obviously preferred the DLP, whereas we can see that the results varied for the other three, where in terms of texture, the SSE and FDM had the worst ones. And again, we can relate that to the printing resolution. And so what we learned from this study is that it's not just about 3D printing of those medicines in terms of the shape or size. We also need to be careful to select the right technology for the right application for the right patients that we're trying to give it to. In terms of clinical applications of 3D printing based on the patient needs, we have several examples here. So the first example would be tacrolimus suppositories, which we used for the treatment of a colonic disease, which is ulcerative colitis. Now, to note about tacrolimus, this drug is known to have a narrow therapeutic index. So in other words, the range between the minimum effective dose and the minimum toxic dose that causes side effects is quite narrow. So it's quite important to give the patients the dose that they need and to be as exact as possible with them. And so what we've done here is that we created suppositories in different sizes. So the smallest size intended to be given to a pediatric patient, the middle size intended for a geriatric patient, and then the largest size intended for an adult patient. And again, that could be easily done with 3D printing just by changing the 3D design. And the thing to note about suppositories is that unlike tablets, it's not really easy to split them, and it's not about the technique. It's the fact that even though you split them, you don't always get an equal distribution of your drug in the suppository. And so there are certain ways to split them. For example, most people recommend that you split them vertically versus not splitting them horizontally, because essentially you are not getting the dose. And that's due to the manufacturing process where because the drug is melted within the actual base, the drug products tend to sediment, so you don't have an equal distribution of your drug. Whereas with 3D printing, because you are creating it in a layer by layer manner, that gives you more even distribution of your drug product amongst the whole suppository. So again, an added benefit. Another example is creating printlets for visually impaired patients. To be exact, here we created tablets with braille and moon patterns on their surface, where patients can use these patterns to identify medications by using tactile perception. So essentially they feel the surface of the tablet and they can read what tablet this is. And this is quite important in the case of visually impaired patients, because it's quite a common practice for these patients to take the medications out of their original packaging, which is often what contains the braille patterns, enables them to identify them. And they often put them in boxes. However, because they suffer from visual impairment, they always, most cases, they get accidents where they end up dropping these tablets out of boxes and they can no longer identify the medication. And so they, what they mostly do is that they end up not taking the medication. And so here, even if they do, if that happens, they can still identify these medications. And so what we've done here is that we printed the different braille and moon alphabets on top of tablets, and we were successful at doing that due to the high resolution of the printing technologies. The added benefit of this particular printing technology is that these printlets disintegrate within a matter of 5 seconds, which means if the patients have to swallow these tablets, they're not going to feel any discomfort due to the presence of the patterns. At the same time, because they disintegrate without the need of water or just a small amount of water, and that means that the patients can self-administer these medications without the help of a carer, which is another benefit for visually impaired patients. The issue with this approach is that you are limited by the size of your dosage form, and so we tried to add more information to the patients, and we did that by creating printlets with different shapes, which again can be easily done with 3D printing. And the idea behind these different shapes is to offer additional information to the patient, such as the medication indication. So if we look at the printlets with a heart shape, these could be used to tell patients that this is the medication that they take for the heart condition, for example. In the case of the sun and moon printlets, they could be used to tell the patient when to take take these medication, for example, in the morning or in the evening. Alternatively, the number of edges can be used to relate it to the dosing time. So for example, 4 edges could be used to tell the patient that you're supposed to take this medication at 4 o'clock, for example. There are different ways to give the patients information, and that could be easily done with 3D printing. And finally, and that's going to be the focus of this presentation, we could use 3D printing for the treatment of rare diseases. As an example, here we use it for the treatment of maple syrup urine disease, which is a rare severe metabolic disorder that affects 100 and 185,000 births. And with this disease, patients have a deficiency in branched chain alpha keto acid dehydrogenase complex, which is basically a complex in the body that enables the body to break down certain amino acids such as leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And because the patients don't have that complex, these 3 amino acids tend to accumulate in their body, reaching toxic level and making it really dangerous for them. And often this disease is identified by looking at the urine of the patients, where we can see that the patients tend to have a dark urine with a sweet scent similar to maple syrup, hence where the name comes. And often to treat these patients, they are put on a dietary restriction of branched chain amino acids. In particular, they put on a strict diet of isoleucine or other branched chain amino acids. However, because the patients need specific doses of the amino acid, this is often done by weighing the powder of the amino acid, in this instance isoleucine. And so after the powder is weighed, it's filled in a capsule and given to the patient. However, we need to keep in mind that most of these patients are children, so a lot of them are unable to swallow these capsules. And so what the parents tend to do is open the capsule and sprinkle the powder over the food. However, this causes a lot of errors, either due to the weighing of the powder or due to the sprinkling technique or due to the children not even eating the whole food that has the full dose of powder. And so here comes a clear example where there is a need for the use of 3D printing. And so what we've done in this study is that we integrated a 3D printer into a hospital pharmacy, in specific the Clinical University Hospital in Spain. And we did the study in collaboration with the University of Santiago de Compostela. And we had 4 different children. Again, you need to bear in mind that this is a rare disease, so you can't have a lot of participants. We had two males and 2 females, where the ages of the children ranged between 3 to 16 years. And the children were put on different doses of isoleucine, ranging between 50 to 200 milligrams, where some of the children had to take it on a daily basis, whereas others had to take it every 2 days. And what we've done is that the children were put on the conventional capsule treatment for 3 months, followed by treatment with the 3D printed tablets for us to compare how each of the 2 forms of treatments can control the isoleucine levels in the blood. And the children were asked to send a dried blood spot through the mail. And then we analyzed that dried blood spot. Now, for the 3D printed tablets, because it's quite easy to change many variables in 3D printing, we created the tablets obviously in 4 different sizes, and that's to correspond to the 4 different drug doses that we were giving to the children. But also we created them in 6 different flavors, including lemon, coconut, banana, orange, raspberry, and strawberry. And here we wanted to evaluate a second variable, which is the acceptability of these different flavors and the colors to the children. And the children were asked to fill a patient-reported outcome. And we also recorded the parent observations to see what they think, how they think that their children are reacting after taking these different flavors. And so to create these formulations, we used the semi-solid extrusion 3D printing technique. And basically here we used a gel and we filled it in a syringe, where the syringe was heated. And then based on the 3D design that we designed on the computer, the syringe drew these patterns to create the dosage forms in a layered by layer manner, where to create 28 tablets, it took about almost 8 minutes. and it was ready and it was sent to the children when they needed the treatment. And so over here you can see that it's quite easy to create the different sizes, and even for the flavors you can just have a different syringe for each flavor. Now, the results and the outcomes. So for the isoleucine levels, so on the left, we'll see that these were the different concentrations of isoleucine in the children's blood, which for some of you might be too hard to process. So let's have a look at the graph on the right side that shows us the mean concentrations versus our target dose of the isoleucine. And so what we will look at is the middle square, which tells us how spread were the actual doses in the blood versus the target concentration. And we'll see with the printlets, we have a narrower mean, which means they allowed a tighter control of the target levels of isoleucine in the blood. So showing that it is actually easier to reach the required isoleucine levels with the 3D printed tablets, because we avoid the errors that are associated with the use of the capsules, as I mentioned before. In terms of the acceptability, the children had different acceptances to different flavors and colors, where the lemon and the orange flavors were the most accepted ones, whereas the coconut and the raspberry were the least accepted ones. In terms of the parent scores, they basically were equivalent to the children's scores, where all the formulations were well accepted, whereas the capsules, the coconut and the raspberry were the least accepted by the children. And so over here, overall, that we can see that there was a positive outcome with the use of 3D printing by enabling a tighter control over the isoleucine blood levels. And then there is a clear preference for the children towards certain flavors versus others. And so that we can apply that into even our daily treatments, because a lot of these children often refuse to take the medications, whereas if we give them the right flavor that they prefer, that could probably enhance their adherence to treatments in general. And so that further provides an evidence for the use of 3D printed medicines for personalized medicines, but not just based on the patient preference, but also depending on the dosing requirements. What are other applications of 3D printing? So 3D printing outside preclinical and clinical studies could be applied for the rapid administration of medicines, especially in the emergency wards, in ambulances, or even to improve medicines access in remote areas. So essentially, it allows us to provide the dosing that's required in a quicker manner. It even allows us to allow medications to reach isolated areas such as disaster areas or war zones, or even in space. And it will actually shock a lot of you to know that in space, the vitals of the people change actually, and the way medications act in their body change. So if we integrate 3D printers, and I know it seems a bit of sci-fi for some of you, but if we do actually integrate these 3D printers in spaceships, we can actually give astronauts the exact doses that they need, which probably is a great application for 3D printing. Alternatively, 3D printing could even be applied in the tracking and tracing of medicines. So for instance, in this study, we printed tablets with having QR codes or data matrices on their surface, with even identification locations that could be used for the verification of the authenticity of medications. So for instance, here for the QR codes or the data matrices, those are meant for patients or doctors to scan them so that they get the information and know for which patient was this medication intended and who prescribed it. Whereas for the colored dots, those could be used by regulatory agencies to know if the medicine is actually authentic or falsified, and using a non-destructive technique. So again, the applications are a lot, and it could extend to different area of the pharmaceutical arena. The concept is easier than it looks like. So our idea is not for patients, is not for doctors or pharmacists to prepare the formulations for each 3D printing technique. It's actually for the same medicine manufacturers to prepare something similar to Nespresso capsules, where you've got your drug and all the other additive mixture ready, and then that gets sent to pharmacists or clinicians where their 3D printed tablet is designed, and they simply put these capsule pods or syringes into the 3D printer, and the tablet gets printed on demand as per the patient requirements. We even see the 3D printing concept to be applied as part of the digital health loop, which is a bigger picture, where patients take these robotic pills that are able to communicate with wireless gadgets such as your smartphone or your Apple Watch. And that allows the physician to monitor your vitals remotely. And based on the results that the clinician gets, they send a digital prescription to the drug manufacturer or the 3D printing facility, where the actual tablet is being printed on demand as per the requirement of the patient, and then that gets sent to the patient remotely. So, and then that keeps carrying on until we ensure that the patient is getting the right treatment that they need, and they are being remotely monitored without the burden of having to travel to the clinic or even burden clinicians, and that saves us time as well. Hopefully that was an informative presentation. So thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Atheer, for a very interesting presentation and to showing us and explaining us this innovative technology of 3D printing of medicine. Unfortunately, we don't have time for the questions because we have to move to the next presentation, but I would like to ask you if you will stay with us for the short Q&A space after all presentations today at 6 p.m. Is it possible that you will answer all those questions, because you have some very interesting questions from the audience? So please, everybody stay with us, and at 6 Central European Time, Atheer will also answer these questions. Thank you again. So now we can move on and we can introduce our next speaker. So our next speaker is Smit Patel. He's a director of digital medicine at the Digital Medicine Society, a consultant for digital therapeutics with Xenda, and a founding member steering committee for Impact Virtual First Medical Practice Collaboration. He brings half a decade of experience at the intersection of innovative medicine, technology, and healthcare from the pharmaceutical industry, payer, health tech, and consulting space. He is a global shaper at the World Economic Forum, a Forbes 30 Under 30 scholar, a TEDx speaker, and an alumnus of the MIT Harvard Health Innovation Program. He is passionate to give back and mentors young healthcare leaders, frequently at MIT Hacking Medicine, Techstars Startup Weekend, etc. He advocates strongly for how digital technology is crafting the new blueprint in our healthcare system, and hopes to be a part of the unstoppable change makers who are ready to transform the healthcare digitally. Thank you very much, Smit, for accepting the invitation to speak at this webinar, and we are ready for your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. And trust me, I'm not that cool as the introduction, but I'll try to make sure the presentation is good enough and valuable for people. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you. And nice to meet everyone who's on the call today. My name is Smit Patel, and I'm representing digital medicine. And today, one of the asks and one of the aspirations was to talk a little bit about digital therapeutics, DTX, and pharma. You know, we have heard a lot about, is it a hype, is it a hope, or will it reshape the health for our patients and communities and individual members? So shall we dive in without any further ado? Looking at the market overview, you know, just to give you a flavor of what's happening and how fast the market is evolving of DTX or digital therapeutics. Globally, we have seen around 21% increase in the market, with around $9 billion evaluation to hit in next 4 to 5 years. And I know that there are 60% people here from European. I'm based out in US, and that's one of the statistics that we always dive in is in US, we spend around $3.3 trillion on chronic conditions. And, you know, that's an opportunity. And I'm sure that it is very similar on the spendings, probably a little different, but a huge spending on chronic diseases and how we take care of our elderly population. With pandemic, we have also seen this amazing rise in the consumer adoption of these digital treatments, and it's predicted to be almost tenfold in the next 2 years. And just to show you an investment landscape of, you know, not only the development is happening, but also there's a lot of investment happening in the space. If we see from the United States to the Europe to in the Asian market, leading from top investors like EDBI, Jazz Ventures, 5AM Ventures, who have been investing in these new technologies, new treatments, essentially, for example, Headspace, Therapeutics, Bioformus, Keeley, Renovia. And when we look at these investments and break it down, where have the top clinical and therapeutic applications has been? Initially in 2018, it started with cardiology space, but over the period of last 2 years, it went into mental health space, and a lot of progress has been around in the mental health and the neurology space. And just to show you a small landscape here around who are the essential players and what are the therapeutic developments by these digital therapeutic companies, from chronic disease management like Mahana Therapeutics, Veldoc, Better Therapeutics, Amalgam, and Bioformus, to mental health space, which is the highest and of it, the largest heat. We have seen Headspace, Cognoa, Therapeutics, Keeley, all leading in there. We have also seen other therapeutic classifications in oncology, with Voluntis leading it, along with the neurology space like MedRhythms and Applied VR, and some of the other emerging ones being ophthalmology and female health. More as we grow bigger in the digital therapeutics as an ecosystem, we see more emerging digital therapies coming out, or prescription digital therapeutics coming out in different arenas, but this is the current landscape that we have seen. So, you know, at Dime, for us, it was very important on the first place to classify and to create this unified language, because it becomes important when we talk to multiple stakeholders, be it patients, be it clinicians, be it hospitals and healthcare systems, be it pharma, be it investors, on what is the difference between a digital health, digital medicine, and digital therapeutics. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of people would know about this on the call, but just to level flame the field, you know, digital health are more around the bigger picture, the outer bubble, if you see. Most of the technologies that usually engage in consumer and lifestyle wellness and health-related purposes that essentially do not require any kind of clinical evidence. But when you see a digital medicine product, it becomes imperative that a clinical evidence is associated with it. And then if you see digital biomarkers becomes a digital medicine product, or RPM and remote patient monitoring technologies become a digital medicine product, while telehealth and decision-making support and entrepreneur support becomes a digital health product. When we talk about digital therapeutics to the far right, you know, there are two things that's needed. One, yes, clinical evidence, but also a real-world outcomes data to see if the digital therapeutic product is treating a disease, managing disease, or improving a health outcome. And as you saw the examples, for example, Samarist or Reset and Reset-O by Therapeutics, or EndeavorRx by Keeley, those are some of the products that falls into the digital therapeutic classification. Just to give you a flavor of what are some of the therapeutic areas where these are being developed, here's a list which is not exhaustive. This is end of the 2020 list that DTA had collected, but we have seen a huge amount of development around metabolic diseases and mental health and neurological diseases, essentially. Just wanted to show there. And let's talk about the product classification, because, you know, when we talk about digital therapeutic, it becomes important in terms of what does the product do? And digital therapeutics can be classified into three different channels: one, treating a disease; one, managing a disease; or one, improving the health functions. And when we see treating a disease, it's more so around it. Is it using the clinical endpoints to support the product claim? Do they have the clinical evidence? They are some of the medium to high risk claims where a prescription is required for patients to access it. But when we see on managing a disease, it comes in between that, where probably a prescription is not required, or it could be required, but they still are considered as a medium claim level risk. While improving the health function, digital therapeutics has been seen to be non-prescriptive products that must use some kind of clinical endpoints, but have a low degree of regulatory oversight in these products. I'm a clinician, and I always think about how do we differentiate digital therapeutics from 300,000 apps that are already available on, say, Google Play or Apple? One of the things that differentiate is the clinical vigor, is the evidence. And here's a small analysis study where all these digital therapeutics or PDT companies, prescription digital therapeutic companies, were evaluated, where we found out that the number of different studies, there were around 52 different studies being done, while only 27% had an RCT or randomized clinical trial. And RCTs are being used as a gold standard when we are developing any kind of pharmaceutical new product. If we saw prevalence of who and which digital therapy companies are doing, almost 50% had at least one product doing it. And the length of duration of these randomized clinical trial or RCTs was around 6.3 months. Just to give you a comparative, a normal drug to come from benchmark research from first phase clinical trial to end stage market, it takes around 10 to 12 years. So it's much faster. These RCTs have helped to accelerate the development of therapeutics so much on a quicker and a tech timeline compared to what we used to think on a pharmaceutical timelines in the earlier stages and earlier days. And the study size has been a little smaller comparatively because the new digital health companies need that upfront capital, need the investment to invest in these RCTs. Moving on to just to show you a very small clinical product case study of Blue Star, which is a WellDocs mobile diabetes management tool. They had a primary endpoint of change in A1C. A1C is one of the measures that a clinician uses every 3 months to see the changes in the body and how well they're managing or how well they're not managing their diabetes and other conditions. They were randomized into 4 groups, and around 163 patients were identified in the analysis. What it was found, and if you follow the diagram here on the screen, the blue stars is the blue line right here. When they were managing over a period of 3 months, they saw around 1.3% decrease in A1C on an average patient compared to the standard of care, while over a period of 12 months, they saw almost 1.2% to 1.9% decrease in A1C, meaning patients were better able to manage their diabetes when there was a technological component and a digital therapeutic integrated into there. Shifting gears a little bit into seeing what the regulatory landscape are, if we see US and non-US perspective, in the United States, there are right now 3 different pathways that these digital therapeutics have been utilizing. 510K pathways, more about is the device or the digital therapeutic product equivalent to an existing legally marketed device. We saw SAMRS, which is for chronic insomnia by Therapeutics, go through that route. If we see de novo, that's another one where a novel device with low risk has a potential to market in US. If you see Akili and Mahana Therapeutics releasing their products through a de novo pathway. And then the third one is a breakthrough pathway, which is more essentially when a device has a combinational product for an effective treatment or diagnosis for specifically life-threatening disease or some of the debilitating diseases. And we have seen MedRhythms and Applied VR getting breakthrough classifications for their regulatories. When we see outside, we have seen great potential and also speed in the German market with the DIGA, with BFarm, with in UK, we see the NICE has done a really great work, and Asian market is catching up right now. So those are some of the regulatory frameworks we have seen around. And when we look at the business and the commercial model of these companies, there has been a couple different pathways because of the newness of these products coming out. We have seen either direct to consumer B2C model, where there is a self-pay option where consumers or patients pay for the solutions out of the pocket. Headspace has been one good example in there. And when we see a B2B2C, where it's initially firsthand with either an employer, a payer, a life science company, or a health assistance network. With employers, it's a huge market in the US, specifically with employers' health-based programs. If they are able to show some kind of wellness, preventative, and medical programs, some of the companies are able to reimburse and have a commercial pathway through employers' programs. The others has been through going via payers. It is long, it is challenging, but also there are companies who have had success. And if we see some of the US payers like CVS Caremark to Express Script, they have created a whole digital health formulary that essentially helps and gives a wide range to providers to prescribe these digital therapeutics apps and also to have reimbursement for those apps. When we look at life science companies, there has been some models and accelerations around how a co-licensing part of the technology happens, where the commercial utilization is in lieu with digital therapeutic companies. While the last one is also more so a health systems and the provider's perspective, where they are able to come in and plug in the provider networks and the clinical health systems network, like Gloco and Kia Health has been very effective in that manner. Moving to the cost effectiveness, one thing that becomes so important, not only that the digital therapeutic product shows clinical efficacy, but can it show some kind of savings to the payer who are paying for it? And I think that becomes really crucial and essential, because if we are showing good clinical activity and not showing cost benefits, the prices will go high and high, and we won't be able to reimburse those. So here's a good example of Livongo, which got acquired by Teladoc, where they showed that a participant could, for a specific diabetes participant, $1,900 were being saved per year for the diabetes management. And if you see per patient per month savings was around $83, not only they were able to save money for the payers, but also have clinical outcomes with a mean reduction of A1C being 0.9%. So how are these priced? There are pricing differences that we have seen either to direct-to-consumer model. We have seen much lower co-pay cost or lower cost to the patient directly. But when we see it go through the medical benefits or pharmacy benefit, it grows through 10x the times of what payment models has been traditionally. You see Akili and Peer Therapeutic. These pricings are for 90-day therapies or 3 months. That's the traditional digital therapeutic cost analysis that they have done. For example, Achilles Endeavor RX, which is an ADHD tool for 8 to 14-year-old, which is attention deficit disorder video game, which is priced at $450. Somers at $18.99. Pear Therapeutics Reset, which was one of the first ones to come out to the market, was $16.65, and Oroxos is $7.50. So yes, and what we were interested at Dime is about what is the future of health with these digital medicine products and digital therapeutic products that are coming out. How do we enhance not just as an ecosystem between the life science companies, but also support the tech and digital therapeutics companies who are creating these innovative solutions for our patients, creating these new emerging therapeutics for consumers? we did a research where, these were some of the thoughts that came out from big biopharma companies to digital therapy companies. And a lot of focus from life science companies was around what are some of the patient problems and how we can utilize digital innovations around it. There was another component around when we create a digital companion strategy, what is the adherence, the access, the affordability? How are we going to integrate into the clinical workflows for prevention, diagnosis, and treatment? So those were really good conversations. And one of the things that we came out with key considerations when there's a partnership between pharma and some of the tech companies, specifically digital therapeutic companies, is yes, pharmaceutical companies are looking at it, they know about it, they know that the ROI or return on investment is a little longer, but what are some of the criteria they should be looking at? They should be considering around these digital therapeutics about accessibility, about personalization, around how they're going to adopt these digital mindset, and around how are they going to either, would they be partnering with an external vendor that they can co-develop, or would pharmaceutical industries be developing their own digital therapeutics in-house? Those were some important standing questions that came out. Some of the things from the technology perspective and the lens that we saw was, they didn't want it to be just one side project that life science companies do and fund and then forgets about it over a long time, but they wanted to be a co-partners around developing these digital therapeutics in the market. And they wanted to be mutual partners towards not just developing the therapies, but also tracking, is it meaningful for the patient? What are some of the patient outcomes data? The data collections, when it happens, how can they continually improve on a longer basis and adapt? Because we know technology changes over time. We have to adapt to the newness and the race and the timeline of technology. So how can they be nimble and also co-create and co-develop and keep getting better for the patients and the companies? And here's a small chart to give you an overview on not just their thinking, but they have partnerships around big pharmas. If you see, Roche has partnered with Samsung, NeuroAir, Bright Insight, AstraZeneca with Propeller Health, Novo Nordisk, Pfizer with Sidekick. Novartis has been one of the other leads for their Ambulatech and the Fred Hutch that they are developing. Sanofi has been investing with Babylon, BMS with Valentis developing their oncology portfolio and improving on that. So we have seen a lot of partnerships happening and a lot of work that has already started. I think the real question is, where are we moving next in terms of these partnerships? Would this be just a dissolving partnerships that we have seen with some of the big pharma companies for specific therapeutic products recently? Or would it actually foster new digital compendium of digital products that would be coming out, specifically digital therapeutic products that would be coming out, and we give an opportunity for our patients with more options on how they want to manage. We give them the more opportunities and options how they will be taking care of their own health in the future. So for us at Dime, what was important is not just building the product, but also building with the evidence on, is it safe? Is it effective? Is it equitable? And the digital divide, we do not want to further divide on the promised benefits and the potential risk, on how can we narrow that gap and how can we make these digital therapeutics and digital medicine products that are trustworthy. Because one thing that we don't want is more patients and consumers not trusting these therapies. If they don't, they're not going to use it. So we came together in 2019, and there was no professional society in 2019 where people can come together and build it together with us. And we launched in 2019 as a nonprofit where our goal was to create an advanced, safe, effective, equitable, and ethical use of these digital products to optimize human health. And for a long time, technology has either straight and kept it as a side. What we wanted to do is how we can sit at an intersection of healthcare and technology, merge expertise together, marry the romance that has been happening over the last few years, and bring in stakeholders who are not only clinicians, researchers, academicians, but also our tech colleagues who are cybersecurity officials, software and hardware engineers and developers, people who understand regulations and policies, the pharma, the investors, patient advocates, patients, to have a platform where people can collaborate, people can come together and build solutions, build research frameworks, build new products. And we are very proud to have our leadership supported by a variety of stakeholders, from regulators like FDA, NIH, to big pharma, to innovative companies and associations and health delivery organizations, to academicians, patient groups, just to give you a flavor of, we want everyone to be a part of this. And it's not about a specific corporation, it's about you. It's about you being a part of the initiative, where if you're passionate about advancing safe, effective, ethical, and equitable use of digital products, join us. And we have members from 1,900. We have 1,900 plus members. I checked recently, from 6 continents and 43 different countries. And we are very proud to involve everyone, because this is for the members, not for specific organizations. And I'll leave with the last parting thought is, 10 years from now, when we look back, we want to think, and we will think, that it was barbaric that we were taking so many drugs when we had technology right at our fingertips. The question is, how are we going to utilize that in our day-to-day life? And how are we going to facilitate and foster what is meaningful for our patients? Thank you for the opportunity to discuss, and thank you for listening to the presentation. Here's my contact details if anyone has any questions or wants to learn about DIME or about digital therapeutics as a whole. And I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Smit, for a very nice presentation and for introduction to digital therapeutics. We have a couple of questions from the audience. So somebody from audience is asking, on the Livongo case, how do you know the A1C levels went down because of the digital therapeutics and not because of the different treatments within the population observed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a fantastic question. I think when they did the study for the Livongo, what they had done was they had randomized people on 4 different classes: people who were using their digital therapeutic platform, people who were not using it, people who were using it as a combinational therapy. So they had stratified around comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And that's how they have come to a conclusion that A1C is going down. And, digital therapies, I'll add on to that, what their thought was, yes, we use statins. Yes, we use specific diabetes drugs to help with the A1C reduction. What they had done was, can we combine those diabetic medications along with a companion, which is a digital therapeutic platform, on better managing it? As we know, for diabetes, it's not about treatment, it's about managing of the disease. And it's about, it is not something that is going to be treated and today you have diabetes and tomorrow you don't. It's about managing on a longer scale. And that's how they conducted the study, comparing it and stratifying. And if I'm happy to provide details about this study, if anyone is interested, but that's how they had utilized.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer. There is another question. How does it support in the CBT? Please, can you elaborate? I believe in cognitive behavior therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the really good Paratherapeutic is working really hard on CBT, and one of the components of either if it's opioid use disorder, if it's insomnia, it's a substance use disorder, a CBT. One of the great spaces from the clinical side is CBT. How do we evaluate? How do we evaluate effectively? One thing that digital therapeutic does very effectively is around the fact that, when patients utilize for 90-day period for the CBT, when you have access to the clinician right at your fingertip when you want it, I think that makes and breaks all the difference. When they do through a virtual platform in a digital therapeutic platform, one thing that happens is, they are not only seeing the patient reported outcomes, but in the background, they are also seeing how the data is being reported. Are they utilizing properly or not? How many hours are they spending to either watch the video, communicate with the doctors? What's the adherence around that? So CBT is one of the areas where we will see a lot more digital therapies being utilized, just because it's not patient-reported outcomes data, but also digitally observed outcomes data that we can collect with the CBT.
Thank you. Thank you. So I hope that our participants will maybe contact you and ask you more about DIME and be your partners as well. So thank you again. Our time is over, so we have to move on and introduce the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. So our next speaker is Mr. Alessandro Ferri. He's Managing Director of Advice Pharma Group. He's president of Alpha Technologies International and co-founder of Da Vinci Digital Therapeutics. He has a master's degree in biological science and an MBA from the University of Bologna. He worked for 20 years at an international level in the pharmaceutical and biomedical sectors, dealing with medical affairs in the headquarters of multinational companies, before starting his entrepreneurial activity in the field of clinical research and digital therapies. Thank you very much, Alessandro, for being with us, and we are ready for your presentation. So you can start to share your screen.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. I will give a really brief overview about what we are doing here in Europe, in Italy, about digital therapeutics and how we are developing them. I'm going to share my screen right now. I will do so. Okay. Here we are. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So we are based in the business incubator of Polytechnic of Milano Engineering University, and we are, since 2012, a software development company. Then later on, we transformed, and we are also a CRO. And currently, we are also ISO certified for the development of digital products as medical devices. And we work with several large or small or medium-sized pharma and other entities, help them to develop digital therapeutics as medical devices. Of course, I will give an overview, briefly overview of digital therapeutics. We had a really nice presentation by Smit Patel about what is happening in US. I will give a really short overview of also the US scenario, just to help me compare what are they doing overseas with what it's happening in Europe, and what as a company involved in the digital medicine and digital therapeutics platform development are doing. So we know that there are several definitions of digital therapeutics. This is recognized as a subcategory of digital health, and it's basically our software-based therapies that have shown clinical efficacy in some clinical trial. And digital therapeutics can really help replacing or improving the treatment effect of traditional medical product. And of course, this has to be demonstrated in clinical trials, and some of them are we are running. And of course, the European regulation impacts also on the clinical evaluation. But still, back on on theory. So we were speaking before about cognitive behavioral therapy. That is one of the basic of the therapeutic algorithm of digital therapeutics. Generally speaking, we all know that how much software can influence behavior, and therefore we can see also behavior impacting clinical outcomes, and therefore this of course is one of the rationale why we know that digital therapeutic can be efficacious on the clinical outcome. This is just a paper of almost 20 years ago of the New England Journal of Medicine, showing how much the behavior in general is impacting clinical outcomes. But from the business perspective, and of course from the regulatory perspective, we know that the potential in the digital therapeutic product is to be convenient and cost-effective solution for the treatment of severe or chronic conditions that are affecting and billions of people, and of course may have an impact on the economy of the national healthcare system. And we know on the other side that the cost of bringing a drug to market is higher and higher year by year. So the opportunity is to have very low development cost of digital therapeutic solution, the extremely easy distribution of this is resulting in a winning combination that is bringing a lot of attention on this area of the medicine. We all know from who is working in this sector, which is the first digital therapeutic that has been approved by FDA that we see has a clear path to the market for these products. So we know the Reset solution that was approved as a prescription digital therapeutics, meaning that it can be prescribed by a medical practitioner for a substance use disorder. And it's based, as we were mentioning, on cognitive behavioral therapy. And it was able to show in several clinical settings how efficacious it was. We can see compared to the standard of care of this group of patients. And the comparison in a clinical trial with standard care, we see it's also the basis in Europe to bring on the market these products. So we already saw from the previous presentation how many partnerships are made on the platform of digital therapies, where startup companies or small tech companies are working together with the big pharma companies on different solutions for a very large spectrum of disorders to address them and to take to the market, maybe in combination with the standard therapeutic option or as substitution of the current therapeutic options. Therefore, you know, there is a lot of, there are so many companies now are being involved since few or many years in developing this solution at global level. And we will see which is the European scenario. Of course, this is also driven, a market driven by the consumers that more and more, especially during the COVID period, but starting already in the some years ago, they started to adopt the digital solution to manage different medical needs, starting from the order prescription product, check health information, or especially in the US, of course, shop for products or services for healthcare. So therefore, this increased demand by the consumers is driving the market. We see, of course, these are US data, how during the COVID period, there was a growth of request of services that can be easily managed with digital solution and sometimes even through the web. And therefore, it's not unexpected that the forecast of the investment in research and development, but also in merger and acquisition of companies that are somehow involved in digital therapeutics development will be seen during the years. Of course, we see that in the US, everybody who is investing in digital therapeutics, in digital medicine in general, has a clear path to bring a product to the market. This is different, of course, in Europe. However, of course, in Europe, as in US, we are very focusing on a special category of digital therapeutics, on prescription digital therapeutics. Those digital therapies were the gatekeepers to enable the patient access to these products is the doctor who is able to prescribe this product, and so associate the patient with this condition with the proper digital approach. And of course, especially in Europe, this is a key, of course, the involvement of the prescriber since the beginning in our experience. So we, as a company, we are working a lot with the potential prescribers of these products, also with the patient association, and to identify which is the algorithm that the digital therapeutics should simulate to enable the best treatment of the patient. As we expected, and we will propose the data from the clinical trials about the effect and the efficacy of this product, the regulatory authorities will compare, of course, the value proposal of our digital therapeutics with the standard of care this is in place at the hospital to evaluate if this solution has a value for reimbursement. Of course, in Europe, there is a big challenge. That is who is the payer of the digital therapeutics. Of course, as you know, Europe, despite we have the EMA, that is the European Regulatory Agency for the drugs, there is, in terms of reimbursement, there is a puzzle of regulatory authorities in the different countries. So, according to the country where you want to propose your therapy, you will have different approaches. But of course, the idea that this may follow the traditional payment model, and I can anticipate that these traditional payment model are those of the medical devices in Europe currently. Of course, we see that there is a really interest, especially by the large pharma companies. We work with a couple of them in understanding how they can assess the market with this solution. If in combination with their blockbuster drugs is an add-on therapy to their maybe more innovative therapies that they are going to launch. So we are also, working with them to really identify the best, not only the best technology for the digital therapy that they want to develop, but also the best business model. Of course, what is happening that, of course, the market probably in Europe is different from US, where, of course, the coverage of health plans has probably accelerated the adoption of this technology and the regulation of the path to the market by the FDA. This is not the same in Europe, but that still has an issue with who will be the payer of digital medicine, digital therapeutics. If the patients, the hospital, the companies, the employers, if these are provided through an insurance covering their cost. And so the discussion is open. Of course, in Europe, as in the US, the fact that there are millions of patients with chronic disease that will have to be managed with a population that is getting elder and elder is driving this decision. Of course, in Europe, they've identified what is digital therapy and why they want to have this reimbursed. But if we compare what Europe is doing, we see that we are one step away. We are still have not many regions that have approved digital therapeutics, and we can see that, of course, Germany, France, and as well as the UK has available for the patient population this solution. But so the situation is not harmonic in Europe. But still, there is a lot of interest and several investments that will be made in the future at the European level that will help us to create a market also in Europe. Of course, what will drive the market? For sure, high quality data on efficacy are needed always in Europe for medical devices, drugs, to enable the authorities at local and international level to evaluate the authorization of any treatment. And of course, it's important to show the economic impact that will have on at country level, at local level, in Italy for sure, at regional level, as well as in Germany, and to show the potential for the cost saving of these innovations. Despite this, still in 2018, there were a few randomized controlled trials on this product. But still, peer-reviewed publication are those able to identify the quality products in terms of efficacy. So the challenge of the digital therapeutics companies in Europe is really to identify not only the technologies, but also to identify the strategies to generate valuable publication on these products. Of course, the trial strategy is also impacted by the authority that will have to provide the reimbursement. In Europe, you see that we have both centralized approval process, but also decentralized approval process, where really local authorities will evaluate the scientific value of the solution. So, who is paving the way in Europe, as Smith's presentation showed before? Germany has identified first in our continent the way towards the reimbursement of these therapies. So, already 1 year ago, the German Parliament identified a regulation supporting digital innovation in the healthcare, and therefore this made Germany at the forefront of digital adoption for healthcare at least at the European level. Not only in terms of digital therapeutic adoption, but really in terms of the digital health, digital medicine platform adoption. So they really were able to identify the areas where they wanted to have a solution adopted, reimbursement, and made available to the population. And so now medical apps that in Germany are CE marketed as class 1 or class 2 medical devices can apply for a fast track market entry. And so the Federal Institute of Drugs and Medical Devices, the Pharma, is able to decide in a few months if to give a green light to the approval of prescribed digital therapeutics and other digital medicine, and start a reimbursement process with, as is happening with drugs and other medical devices, for software as medical devices that are used for digital therapy and digital medicine. They have also a negotiation process and a reimbursement already in place. So what is happening in Europe in Germany? Of course, that as I'm being based in Italy, of course, I can see this, of course, still from a country. However, what we see is that they have received already 11 positive opinions for digital therapeutic solution, and there are 23 of them. These are data from, as you can see, from mid-March of this year. So Germany, we can see that is, of course, driving the way, and other countries probably will align to this approach. What we see from the customer side in Germany, we saw from this graph that the reimbursement of the software as medical devices for digital therapy that were mainly apps to be downloaded impacted on the download rate starting from the reimbursement of this application. So creating a sort of course, a logic connection between the user adoption and the reimbursability of these products. which is the cost. So this is a table from a website showing which is the average cost of these apps for digital therapeutics and the monthly reimbursement of each of them, ranging from some less than 50 euros to up to almost 200 euros per month, according to the products and the condition to be treated. That, of course, it's in line from what we are expecting also in other European countries for reimbursement. So just going to my experience as the request, of course, being invited as a speaker to show which is our experience as a company that is currently developing digital therapeutics and being ISO certified, will take this to the mark as a software as a medical device. Of course, in Italy, we work under regulation by the Ministry of Health, and that currently expressed only in an official document that it is a performance plan of this 2020-2022, where he was mentioning digital therapeutics, but just clarifying that the aim of the Italian regulatory authority is really to work to gather information about the digital therapeutics that are being developed by pharmaceutical companies at European level, and to evaluate which is the proper regulatory process to be supported at European and local level. So hopefully Italy, after following Germany and a couple of other European countries, will also enter and will help to create the European market for digital therapeutics. Our experience as Advice Pharma. Our experience is, of course, as I said, we are a software developer company since some years. We are also a CRO, so we run the clinical trial, but also we are ISO certified, ISO 13485, as a legal manufacturer of software as a medical device that currently will be the regulatory frame under which digital therapeutics can be approved and commercialized and hopefully reimbursement in Europe. So as a CRO, we are decided to have also this ISO. In the past, we were also involved in several digital medicine platform development. This is a publication on BMJ Open of one platform of digital medicine that we created for the management of lung cancer patients from remote. So we, of course, developed the application, and it was a solution that was able to track the weight loss of these patients and of the daily body temperature. And of course, there was an algorithm behind that was able to alert the physician and to report to them if there was any progress in worsening of the condition of the patients. And we are currently completing the clinical trial on the digital medicine, and that, of course, has been designed to be compared with the standard of care for these patients. And for this digital medicine, we are running a studies. It's an observational study in terms of treatment, but the digital medicine is given only to one arm of the patient. So the digital medicine approach is provided for one group of patients. So and the patient can be either randomized to the standard of care alone or standard of care plus the digital medicine. Of course, we are evaluating the impact not only on the quality of life of this patient, but of course we will have a health economics assessment. Then we are also so busy in developing devices for assisted pregnancy. So, for example, this is a platform of digital medicine that has been developed and is able to take data directly for electronic health record at the public or private clinic where the couple is seeking pregnancy. And of course, this is still a digital medicine, meaning that it provides services both to the physician and to the couples, but it's not yet a digital therapeutic, so it's not providing a benefit in terms of clinical outcome. But this is our current and past experience on digital medicine and digital health. Of course, we have to work in Europe with the GDPR compliant platform to manage clinical data of the patients, because of course the GDPR has impacted all the approach to the data governance, not only in clinical trials where we are busy, mainly busy, but also in adoption of and validation, clinical validation of digital medicine, digital therapy. This is our portfolio of product that is being developed currently on behalf of the industry. We have a two industry-sponsored project on chronic kidney disease digital therapy, on cardiac rehabilitation digital therapy that we are ready to test in a trial to run the clinical evaluation and seeking to obtain the CE mark of this product next year. We have about the business model of these products. So we have in our in our experience, we have two products that are products that have been developed by the industry. So we are supporting the companies to develop this product. But we have also a different business model where the industry provides donation. These are multiple industries providing donation to a single no-profit organization that is working with us to develop their digital therapy that will be provided to all the hospitals that are running service for oncohematological patients. So in this case, the digital therapy will be available for free for all the patients thanks to donation of the industry to a no-profit organization. This is another model. Then we have finally another therapy that is going to be developed in the next 2 years in managing severely obese patients. And this is again a combination of investments between the public, so an hospital, and the industry that will work together, of course, together with our company, developing a digital therapy for the disease. I will go fast on some of the clinical evaluation we are ready to run on the digital therapeutics that we are developing. This is a chronic kidney disease. Of course, we expect that the regulatory body will evaluate in a positive way the comparison of data gathered comparing the digital therapeutic option with the standard of care. So we have a couple of randomized trials as clinical evaluation of software as a medical device. I want to underline that the approach that we adopted is the one that was, also successful in Germany, and that we expected will be successful. So to request for the reimbursement of digital therapeutics that have the feature of a software as a medical device. Therefore, we are trying to seek the CE mark for this product as a medical devices, and this is one of the first study that we will complete with the digital therapy for chronic kidney disease management. Of course, we will evaluate according to the standard criteria for these therapeutic areas. Of course, as being an industry process, I canceled the confidential information of this process, but just for your benefit, the design of this study, these are usually randomized studies that want to compare the digital therapy solution with the standard of care. So, and of course, we will have a follow-up evaluation by the specialist of patients that will follow the digital therapy schedule. And of course, said also our have an impact of the behavior of the behavior, also supporting by the digitalization of the cognitive behavioral therapy, will help to improve the lifestyle adoption that have a direct impact on the condition. Of course, the app will not only have an algorithm for the treatment, so a therapeutic algorithm, the one that will be efficacious to impact on the behavior of the patient and show the improvement of clinical results, but we will have many what we call digital excipients, so meaning that services on the digital therapy that help to create the engagement of the patient towards the digital therapy that enable the patient to adopt the digital therapy. So are all services and the solutions that are provided through the patient app that do not directly affect the patient condition, but increase the compliance of the patient towards the digital therapy. Of course,
Alexandro, for interruption, but we should go quickly as the time is almost over. So I just wanted to remind you that we have like 3 minutes. Okay. Sure.
Thank you. So we have also using remote monitoring devices to monitor the parameter of digital therapeutics. We have, of course, other digital therapeutics impacting the physical training of other patients. And this is, for example, the one that I was mentioning, that's a digital therapy that is being developed thanks to the donation of several big pharma companies that will be made available for free to oncohematological patients in Italy. And we will be running the study also to seek the CE mark registration of this product. So there is finally, my last 2 slides, there is a potential growth of digital therapeutics in Europe opportunity for sure. Currently, the market is driven by projects that are supported by large pharmaceutical companies, and sometimes also from no-profit organizations, in our experience. Of course, COVID was able to accelerate the adoption of the digital strategy in several companies, especially the early adopters, but also the fast follower. And finally, we think that despite Europe is a late adopter of innovation due to the regulatory restriction, in 1, 2, no more than 3 years, we think that we will have a European market for digital therapeutics. And we see that the companies we are working with are preparing to be ready with their solution for this market.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation. Also, we have actually prepared a poll for the participants, right? So we can quickly also run through this poll. So I will just launch it. Yes, so you can vote in the poll, dear participants. Okay, let's wait for more 10 seconds. Okay, so let's go through the results. So perhaps you can comment those answers.
Yes, of course, I'm glad to, as I will comment according to our experience. Yes, in our experience, big pharma companies are driving this market currently. They are investing in the startups, but also they are commissioning and they are asking to manufacturers and developers of digital therapy, as we are, to develop their digital therapeutic solution. And sometimes of course, yes, this therapeutic solution can complement the drug, but they are also seeking to identify digital therapeutic solutions that are really able to replace the standard therapeutic approach. And yes, of course, we expected that the EMEA and also the European bodies will give an opinion and direction, but in our experience, also local, national, and even regional bodies will, if digital therapeutics in Europe will follow the path as for Germany is already happening of being commercialized as software as a medical devices, to our knowledge, only also at the regional, local, and really at hospital level, the reimbursement will be discussed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you also for a very interesting presentation. Will you be able to stay with us also at 6 to answer questions from the audience? Because we have questions. Okay, perfect. So thank you again for joining us and for your presentation. And now it's time to introduce another speaker. This time it will be a lady. In advance, I would like to apologize for incorrect pronunciation of your surname. Malika Bouazzaoui is a mental health innovation expert with experience in both entrepreneurship and pharmaceutical sectors in Europe and in the US. Malika has a wealth of experience in the new and exciting field of digital therapeutics, which is rapidly growing. She has taken part in the development and launch of the DTX products, as well as research regarding the effectiveness and the potential of digital mental health tools. Malika completed an MBA and studied therapeutic innovations. Thank you very much, Malika. I hope you are ready to start with your presentation.
Yes, absolutely. Let me share my slides. Hello, everybody. So I'm Malika Bouazzaoui, and I'm a consultant in the field of digital mental health. Thank you so much for having me today. Today, my objective is to give you an overview of the field, the current state of affairs, and demonstrate hopefully how what an exciting opportunity this is. And don't hesitate to share your questions. I'll try and make time at the end. So I know that you've already heard today about what digital therapeutics are. Just as a short summary for my presentation, in the field of digital mental health, it tends to be usually mobile applications that are prescribed by providers or provided by employers or downloaded directly by users that are on the phone of people with mental health issues directly. And so it's this fast emerging class of therapeutics that uses software to treat psychiatric disease. And there's really two possibilities, either beyond the pill type digital therapeutics that tend to be either with psychiatric drugs or for people who have comorbidities, say diabetes and depression, or dermatological issues with anxiety. And there's also standalone digital products for people who have mental health issues, again, anxiety, depression, but also, say, ADHD. And I think I have a little poll now for us to take a step back and look at, within the greater field of digital therapeutics, what's the size of the digital mental health market. So if you want to put your guess in, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Let's see what the results are. Yes, great. So that's exactly right. It's about 30% of the whole digital therapeutics market is mental health, which is huge. And obviously both digital therapeutics as a market and digital mental health as a category are growing rapidly. I've heard recently the CEO of Ginger saying that actually mental health is playing catch up, and so it's going to grow much faster than the broader digital therapeutics market. So we're looking at this very closely. CB Insights were saying that in 2020, the digital mental health market was about 900 million. And already in Q1 of 2021, it's 500 million. So it's indeed growing very rapidly. That's the categorization that we could use for digital mental health. And I'll give you a few concrete examples just to make it a bit more tangible for you. So digital mental health tools or digital therapeutics for mental health are comprised of cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, for depression, for addiction, games that could offer sensory or motor stimuli to address cognition in ADHD, for example, apps that support parents to help children with ADHD. And you might have heard words such as ICBT or computerized behavioral therapy, and these are all digital mental health tools. At the moment, the market is focusing on stress, on anxiety, on addiction, and on depression. Here you can have a small sample of the existing partnerships, and it's quite interesting because you can see that big pharma like Sanofi and Takeda are involved. You can see that there are some smaller pure digital health companies, and you can see that there's also national health systems. So it's a field in which a lot of different types of partner are starting to get involved. And I should add that the Lancet recently said that they predict this market to be worth 16 trillion by 2030. So it's indeed going to be a very huge market. So why is there a need for this type of tools? And that's a real question, because it's quite a new development, even though mental health has been an issue for a while. The first thing is that out of all the people who have been diagnosed by mental health issues, 60%, so more than the majority, are not taking any medication, are not going to the psychotherapist or the psychologist. And so there's this huge unmet need of people with diagnosed mental health issues, but who are not getting their needs met. And I really want to stress that these are people who are diagnosed. And so it's just anyone's guess how many people are not diagnosed and suffer from mental health issue. It really is a huge issue. And we know that the WHO said that 450 million people have their mental health disorder lead to disability. And that's, again, is, you know, 250 million people who are disabled because of their mental health. And you can imagine the economic and social repercussions of that. In August, just this August, the CDC in the USA said that 40% of Americans, struggle with anxiety, depression, or substance abuse because of COVID-19. So again, the timing is quite special. This issue has been around for a while, but right now the world seems to wake up to the opportunity because of the pandemic that we find ourselves in. In England, it's about between 15 and 20% of people who meet a diagnostic criteria. So again, they have mental health issues to a clinical level. And obviously there's a lot of people who have subclinical levels of depression or anxiety. There's a huge cost to this, and it's been estimated to be 1 trillion in the US and 105 billion per year in the UK, which is planned to double by 2040. So again, huge numbers there about the cost of mental health for us as a society. And so you have a lot of people who are diagnosed and are not getting the help they need. You have a lot of people who have mental health issues and aren't even diagnosed, you have this cost for society. And on top of that, there's the cost for patients when the national health system can't cover for them, or where the insurance doesn't cover psychotherapy, for example. Even if everybody could afford psychotherapy, you just do not have enough therapists, you don't have enough psychiatrists. In the US, for example, 60% of the counties don't have a psychiatrist within their borders. And so this is where digital mental health really is a huge opportunity, because obviously it's scalable. And while we don't have the professional mental health support for these people, with digital tools we can provide for their needs without waiting for a whole generation of new mental health professionals to be trained. Why is there a need for digital mental health? Again, for a lot of people, there's a huge barrier. Remember, there's 60% who are diagnosed but are not seeking help. There's a huge barrier that's called stigma, and digital mental health can help disinhibit them and have this first interface with mental health and mental self-care. And that could help them learn about mental health and later go to professionals, for example, but also directly get the help that they need right now without waiting and delaying. In an ideal world, it would probably be a first line of treatment. We could imagine that digital mental health is an early intervention as first line of treatment before people go on to see a professional, and it could be used with medication or without, or before therapy or in conjunction with therapy. Also, for all of the people that I talked about who have subclinical levels of, say, anxiety, depression, other mental health issues, these digital mental health tools could act as prevention. One big aspect of digital tools is that they're always with you. And so they're very helpful in terms of daily motivation, in terms of tracking, in this space between appointments when people are losing motivation or not able to change their thoughts or their behavior on a daily basis, and they need that extra support to be able to make that change. Of course, things like panic attacks, for example, don't wait until your appointment with your psychologist or psychiatrist next week to take place. They happen whenever they happen. And the great thing with digital tools is that they're always with you, rather than wait a week to be able to debrief it with your psychologist or your psychotherapist. And of course, both are complementary. It's not because you do have the mental health tool that you don't need to then go to a professional and talk about your unique special experience. But both are complementary, as, for example, some people feel a bit too overwhelmed to call one of the hotlines whenever they're having a crisis. And most professionals don't necessarily take calls 24/7 with their own patients. By now, obviously, we're in this context of a global pandemic, and this has had a huge impact on people's mental health. One of the main impact has been through reduced support. So one of the main things that make the difference between somebody who's experiencing a huge amount of stress and who is going to develop a mental health issue compared to somebody who is also experiencing a huge amount of stress but is not going to develop a mental health issue is how much support they have. So their friends and families and their ability to be vulnerable and get the support that they need from people around them. Now with COVID, unfortunately, for a lot of people, that support has been removed. Phone calls is not necessarily as much support as face-to-face, but also it's been a lot easier for people who say are suffering from depression to withdraw and isolate themselves, and nobody's noticing because everybody's at home anyway. So that has been a huge issue. And of course, the demand for mental health support services has risen tremendously in the UK, we've seen a 60% increase in public mental health services and about 45% increase in psychiatric demand. And 10% of the population seems to have severe mental health issues, which again is a huge number and huge toll on our National Health Service. Employers are also noting that their employees are having challenges in terms of mental health, and that's also an opportunity. A lot of them have been providing digital mental health support tools to their employees, looking at how to support remote workers. So I talked about the distance and the fact that obviously everybody's working remotely, and so digital mental health tools in a way almost act as a substitute now for face-to-face mental health support, or while people are on waiting lists, say for this, our national health systems, which are overburdened. We also saw with COVID new risk groups, such as care workers, who used not to be a huge part of the demand for mental health support, but now are, and obviously a priority group. And obviously you have just the fact that there is COVID and that people are in lockdown, that is creating anxiety, depression. People are losing their jobs, they're losing loved ones. And this again is fueling the demand for mental health support. Now I'm going to talk in a bit more depth about the evidence for digital mental health tools. And we have some very tangible results from studies and randomized clinical trials that shows really the impact that digital mental health tools can have. And you can see a few of them here. You have depression and anxiety that are on a clinical level that are reduced by Silver Cloud through ICBT. You have Sleepio, which helps people sleep and not have insomnia anymore. And in 3 months, they can help about 75% of people achieve healthy sleep levels. You have Happify that again improves anxiety and depression through gamified CBT. And Frispira, for example, which helps people with panic attacks. And so the field is quite varied. Every app is different. Every app has a different feel to it, a different way of helping people. Some of them are going to be more game-based. Some of them are going to be more meditation-based, or clearly changing your thoughts and more structured. Some of them are going to be have some peaceful environment. Others are going to be lots of colors and happy feelings associated with it. So different apps fit different types of mental health issues. I also want to touch on the health economic modeling, because now in the field we already have a lot of evidence for the actual outcomes of digital mental health tools. What is lacking and what payers, for example, are demanding more of are health economic modeling and showing the potential cost savings that providing these type of tools would provide. And obviously we've seen this trend initially in the US and now in Europe more and more of employers providing these type of tools to their employees. And so we have, for example, Sleepio that shows that more than 1,600 cost saving per employee in healthcare cost. There's very few of these numbers that are public information, but this is something that's quite topical in the field right now to get reimbursement, for instance, for the products that want to be digital therapeutics per se, and therefore prescribed and reimbursed. And this is just the funding news from the last 4 months, so since December. And you'll see these are really, really huge numbers, and this is just to show you how exciting it is to be in this field right now, because things are moving very fast, very quickly, and at a huge scale. We have just last month in March, Happify Health, who raised 73 million. We have Lyra, who since December raised about 185 millions, Ginger raised 150 millions, etc. And again, there's a lot of money in the field, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of growth in these companies to provide for the increasing demand for the reasons that I've mentioned before. There are challenges ahead, and there's a lot of questions still that we ask ourselves in the field. One is, should these tools be purely digital? Or should there be, say, coaches or psychotherapists or any type of professional that give tailored advice on this tool? And should it be, is a hybrid model maybe more viable? Do people want this more personalized aspect? We don't know that, and we're also looking at for whom. Are there categories in the population where a purely digital tool would be optimum, whereas in other populations, actually, they wouldn't engage with it unless there is a human face behind it? I talked a bit more earlier as well about insurance companies and what they're looking for in terms of providing these type of tools for their members. But there's also the drive for platform models. What insurance companies do not want is one app per disease. And so the push now is to create these platforms where different mental health issues or even broader diseases and comorbid diseases are treated through the same tool, so that patients don't have to navigate within apps, and so that the data is integrated, and both the patients and the insurance have an integrated experience. Obviously, one other important stakeholder are doctors and prescribers, and we know that them recommending a digital mental health tool is extremely important for patients to try it and stick with it. It's not yet clear in terms of the efficacy and how much the patients would use it, whether if it's prescribed or if it's not prescribed, if that makes a difference, and whether these tools work as well for people who have a diagnosis compared to people who don't have a diagnosis. So these are still questions that we're working through. The level of evidence, as I said, there's quite a bit of evidence, and now that more and more people are using these tools, obviously the data collected will provide even more evidence. What we want to know, obviously, is whether people use it, whether it's sticky enough, and real life outcomes. A lot of these randomized clinical trials that took place were on few people, quite short, on quite privileged members of society, and so we want to see whether they work on more diverse populations, but also for longer periods of times, and whether the outcome levels is as high for random members of the public or people who have been prescribed this type of tools. I talked briefly about engagement, and because that's really is the key, people need to come back to these tools for them to have an impact on their mental health. And therefore, the user experience is very important, and the engagement and stickiness is something that digital mental health companies are looking at very closely. Data management, I talked a bit more about this. Obviously, digital health data is quite a sensible topic for patients, and there's issues in the field, or rather it makes it difficult sometimes to test these tools in a truly technological way. Lack of familiarity of users and decision maker, that's the case less and less, I would say, for national health systems and governments, as in Europe and the States. We can see many examples of France, Germany, the UK, and the US trying these things, even in Hong Kong. But doctors sometimes feel that they have not been educated enough to be able to prescribe these. And so there's quite a bit of education still to be done on these tools before they're more widely prescribed. As a conclusion, as I hope I conveyed to you, this is a really fast-growing, exciting market to be in. We have employers as early adopters, and more interest from insurance companies, and work still to be done with doctors and users, and look at the engagement rates and the actual outcome rates in the real world. I would welcome your questions if you have any. I think we might have 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Malika, for a very exciting presentation and to reminding us the importance of mental health and that we shouldn't really underestimate this. So we actually have to move on to the next presentation, but I would like to ask you, what is, in your opinion, the digital mental health, a B2C or a B2B market?
So that's a really interesting question, because these are two very different business models. For the B2B, so going through employers, and this is what we've seen actually in the market so far. The scale up is much faster, because obviously the account managers tend to go to the bigger enterprises, and then there's a bit of quite a bit of take up. We don't know actually if in the end how much people use these tools, the employees, and how much they benefit, and there's a lot of data mining that needs to be done to check on the mental health outcomes of the users. In the B2C market, we think that users are a lot more convinced already, because they're either paying for the app or they're downloading it from their own interest, and therefore we think that they're a bit more engaged with the tool, but there's still a lot more research to be done in this field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answer. Also, the sector of digital mental health looks like fragmented. So do you think it will consolidate?
Yes, right now it's quite fragmented. It's very likely that it will, especially for this drive towards platform that I mentioned earlier. We don't really know how it's going to look like in the end, and this is still a very, very new field, but it's quite certain that it will consolidate in the next few years. Maybe not immediately, but we'll see who in the market drives engagement by patient and mental health outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much again for accepting the invitation to speak at this webinar. Dear participants, if you would like to know more about digital health, please contact Malika or find her on LinkedIn. Thank you. And now it's time to introduce our last speaker. Our last speaker is Mr. Vincent Galand, who is Head of Partnerships and Founding Partner at Health Innovation Coalition and Digital Pharma Lab. He's engineer and researcher by training. Vincent has 10 years of various experience in the fields of entrepreneurship, digital health, pharma tech, and fintech startups. In 2019, together with other colleagues, he launched Digital Pharma Lab, the first independent pharma tech accelerator in Europe, driving the digitization of the pharma industry. Vincent loves sharing his knowledge and is professor at Europe Business School in Entrepreneurship, at EM Lyon Business School in Design Thinking, and at the Medical Faculty of Grenoble in Digital Health. Vincent is an alumni of UC San Diego, Harvard University, Cranfield University, Grenoble University, and the College des Engineers. When at work, Vincent loves to cook pastries and Italian desserts and spend time traveling in wild territories. Thank you very much, Vincent, for being with us today, and we are ready for your presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, it's working. All right, I didn't know you would read everything, so it's quite embarrassing, but it's quite funny as well. Okay, so I will just share my screen if the screen wants to. All right, and put in the full mode. All right, let me know. So it should be okay right now. You should be able
yes,
to
yes, it's perfect.
Thank you very much. All right, so I will not speak about digital therapeutics or other things. It was interesting to hear the last speaker, because I was with a pharma company just earlier, and we were discussing about mental health topics, and we they want to do solutions that are not sticking to one drug, but are more broad, and that is non-proprietary solutions. So definitely the last speaker was completely right about this, because it's what I can witness among pharma companies. So I will talk to you about collaborations with startups and the role of accelerators. Maybe you never heard about Pharmatech, about accelerators, about why startups can be very, very efficient in order to drive the digitization of the pharma industry. And I will also highlight some initiatives that we are currently moving forward in France and in Europe. And I think it's very interesting. And what I'm witnessing right now in the industry, at least in France and Europe, is really, really at the forefront of what we can do in pharma innovation today. So I don't want to brag about it too much, but I really think by the feedbacks I got from friends in the United States and in other parts of the world, in Asia as well, that what we are doing is really something very interesting. So first of all, I want to talk to you about Pharmatech. I don't know if you ever heard about that word. It's a word we invented 2 years ago when we launched Digital Pharma Lab. And it's really interesting in the sense that it defines what is driving now the industry innovation. Pharmatech are actually new players, new stakeholders in the industry. So it's startups that can be either innovating in the way the pharma industry is currently working, like in R&D, in clinical trials, in manufacturing, in compliance, and they are bringing new solutions and technology that completely change the way traditionally the pharma industry is working. For example, in R&D, in drug discovery, we have Benevolent AI. It's an American startup. It's a unicorn, actually. So I don't know if you know what a unicorn is, but it's a startup that is valued more than $1 billion. And they just actually have an algorithm that can read tons of scientific papers and find different correlation between proteins and other potential drugs, and that can really speed up drug discovery. And they actually found a few candidates for cancer drugs, and they work with AstraZeneca right now. And because it's working very well and it's very promising, right away the startup have been valued more than $1 billion. And we have other examples of startups like this that completely change the way pharma industry is working, and that is really, really, really important because it drives the future of the industry. And we have also startups like at the right of the screen that completely propose new solutions that are competing or completing the traditional drugs. We have MoveCare, for example, who is a startup, French startup, actually French-Israeli startup, and is the first what we can call digital therapeutics that have been approved in Europe. And it's for lung cancer patients. And using this app is making the lifespan of cancer patients longer of 7.6 months compared to the patients that don't use the mobile application. Why? Just because it actually asks questions currently to the patients to know how they are, how they feel, if they have symptoms, and a very simple algorithm just compute different answers by the patients and can tell to the physician that the patient is collapsing or something is going wrong. And so they come to a meeting earlier than expected. And this really timely management of patients make them survive longer. And it has been approved at ASCO. It's a very, very famous conference in cancer in Chicago every year. And this mobile app is now reimbursed by the French Social Security. So it's something really crazy that's happening. And it's really paving the way for new digital therapeutics. And we have also Lucine, So I pronounce it with the French accent, Lucine, and it's the first pharma company that is only creating digital therapeutics. It's French, it's based in Bordeaux, and it's a completely pharma company of a new kind, and they are starting, so they don't have a lot of drugs on the market, but they have a huge pipeline of digital therapeutics drugs that are currently being approved, and this is very paving the way also. And so we think that working with those startups will actually drive the innovation in pharma, because the pharma companies are too focused on the core areas of the core job. They don't change right away, and startups are bringing the innovation because the nature of startups is to stick to the needs of patients, of healthcare professionals, of healthcare institutions, and to be able to adapt every day to the changing needs of these clients, I can say. And so they have the adapted structure to really innovate. And then it's by working with those startups that the pharma companies can innovate quickly. Is what actually we are thinking, and is what we are doing at Digital Pharma Lab. So we are actually helping to overcome the pharma's greatest challenges by connecting healthcare industrials, so of course pharma companies, but not only, medical device manufacturers as well, CROs, with the pharma tech startups all over the world, and with also VC and investors, because they have the money to be able to finance the startup also, and to help the startup to become a scale-up. That means to grow broadly. And so it's what we are doing here, and this is the Digital Pharma Lab community we are creating now in Europe, and we are expanding also internationally. So we interviewed a lot of executives in pharma, such as Clarisse Pamiès. So she's no more at Janssen Company. She's working for a startup right now called Open Mind, and she have a lot of. She's a former consultant for Boston Consulting Group. She's very bright, and discussing with her a lot of time, she told us that digital solutions have become integral part of new businesses, but we have to find the right partners, and working with them can be really challenging. So it's very important to change the culture of the pharma companies, to be able to work with those startups, and to be able to just to come to their speed, because there's a lot of failure rates between startups and pharma companies, because they are two different worlds that sometimes have hard time to connect to each other. We're also working with Biogen, and the entity that is responsible for digital healthcare. So it's called Biogen Healthcare Solutions. And one of the global head of this business unit is called Thibaut Guimard. It's a bright French guy as well. And the headquarters of this business unit is based in Paris. And he talked to us about the different challenges that are faced by industrials in digital innovation. So it can be, as I told you, the lack of new molecules. It can be slowed market growth. It can be many different things. And so Biogen is very exemplary in this transformation, because they really created a dedicated department or business unit in the whole company with more than 60 full-time employees to be able to develop healthcare solutions and work with startups to develop those solutions. And this is very powerful, and really for us and for other industrials, it's really an example. So now is restructuring, and there are some change being done in these Biogen Healthcare Solutions, and I think we might have news, great news coming in the next few weeks. I cannot tell you more because I don't know, but I know there are some changes going on. But really they are really exemplary. So we work with more than 2,000 pharmatech and health tech startups worldwide. And what we do is we connect the needs of the pharma industry, and we find the right startups to work with them, and we create projects and accelerate them until deployment. And this is working very well. We work virtually with almost every pharma companies and private institutions all over the world. Okay, this is just to show you that we are really at the heart of the transformation and understanding the different needs and working with them. A few words about the team we have. So we are actually coming from different sectors. We have, I'm more from the startup side in the pharma industry, pharma tech startups. We have Pascal, who was a former director of IMS Health or IQVIA, so he's expert in health data. And we have Didier Tranchier, who is a former professor at Wharton, and he's coming from the digital world. And we have a lot of bunch of different expertise together that we gather to answer the needs of the community. And we have also a strategic committee coming from all over the world, and they help us to drive this transformation. Okay, and this is to show the different affiliates we have. Of course, the main one being in Paris, but we have partners and contacts in different parts of the world. So what we do is acceleration program. As I told you, we listen to the main issues faced by the healthcare executives in the pharma industry. We find the right startups to answer them, and then we sprint. This is just an example of the season 4. So one season is lasting 5 months, 5 to 6 months. And we are now at the 4th seasons. In the 4th season, we have 2 big projects with Ipsen, so it's a French pharma company, and with Shugai Pharma, it's a Japanese company. And all the events we're doing and the different projects are public. So if you want to come to the demo day in May or to the kickoff meeting of the season 5 or 6, everything is broadcasted on YouTube like this UBIC conference, because we don't want to keep secret what's happening. We really want to show how pharma innovations is undergoing in other countries. We really want to show what is going on, and so everything we do is public. And Digital Pharma Lab actually is not only private venture, it's also supported by public institutions such as the European Commission and EIT Health, and this is very important. So this is there are different projects we've been running. So you can see that those projects are in different fields. It can be in drug discovery, in clinical trials management. It can be also in developing digital therapeutics with Biogen and other companies. So you can see that all the pharma tech innovation projects are really broad and in all the value chain of the pharma industry. And this is very, very interesting because we can see that they are all interested by different things. We have also chatbot experiences with between Abbott and AGMA AI, who wants to increase adherence to treatment in emerging countries, for example. We have solutions coming to revolutionize the medical visit. So it's getting very broad, very broad. Anyway, you will have the presentation at the end, and please, Vlad, cut me because I cannot see the time. So if I need to finish, just let me know.
You still have like 8 minutes.
All right, thank you. I will put the chrono because I don't like to be late. All right, fine. All right, and as I told you, we can see everything's happening. So what are the overview of the results of the first season of acceleration of projects we've been doing? So we've been working with around 10 pharma companies, and we have been like having 27 crushes. So crushes is like, how to say, You know, on these social meeting applications like Tinder or some others, when you meet, then what we call that crushes, and the word come from there because we really actually foster meeting between those pharma companies and those startups, and really sometimes they have what we call in French a coup de cœur. It means like a love attack. They really think they can work together greatly, and our first objective is to create as many crushes as possible. Then we deep dive into what can be done concretely in the collaboration, and we come up to 22 startups selected to continue the different projects. And among those 22 projects, we arrived to 17 proof of concept or MVPs. MVPs is minimal viable product. It means like the first steps of a product that can be shown. And so this over just 9 months, which is really fast, and is what we want to do. You can see that among this all these projects, we have a lot in R&D, drug discovery, genomics, clinical trials, some in manufacturing and market access and sales, and a lot in patient use. So in patient monitoring, of course, and the care pathway, like how to improve the care pathway. What are the financial impacts? So thanks to this acceleration, we have been able to sign more than 700,000 euros of contracts between the pharma companies and the startups. So it's not really huge, but it's quite a lot if we think about the the revenues of a startup when they begin to work. And most importantly, we've been helping those startups to raise more than 40 million euros by our partners, VCs and others, after they've been accelerated. So here is a few examples of different projects we've been doing with, for example, Amgen and Kodak. So the aim, the product is still running on, and Thibaut de Chalut, who is the Innovation and Investment Program lead at Amgen, is really happy of it, and really can talk a lot about it. And the aim was to build a digital solution to allow the identification of high-risk osteoporotic patients, to be able to spot them at the hospital and to be able to smooth their care pathway. And this was very successful until now. We have also Servier, so a French laboratory with Synsight. This is another collaboration in drug discovery that combine artificial intelligence, imaging, molecular modeling, and high content screening to be able to find faster potential drug candidates. And these have been working quite well as well. And every 6 months, we review the collaboration and presenting you the results. Another one with Chugai, so the pharma company based in Japan, and Chronolife for hemophilia patients, basically, because Chugai have a joint venture with Roche in the therapeutic area of hemophilia, and they are proposing and delivering the last drugs. All right, so it was just to tell you that this way of collaborating with startups and to have an external part, a third part like Digital Pharma Lab to foster collaborations is very important. And we computed that on average, the success rates of collaboration between pharmas and startups are 10%. And with our program, we achieve a success rate of 70 to 75%. So that's not really high, but that's much better than the average. And we hope, thanks to this, that we can accelerate the transformation of the pharma industry, and also that we can develop the next unicorns, the pharma tech unicorns of tomorrow. So the next champions in Europe and in the world in the pharma industry. I want to talk to you now and briefly about an initiative we've been running in France. It's called Coalition Next. So it's something really crazy. It's like the first time that different pharma companies and healthcare institutions are gathering to actually run different call for projects and finance innovation. This coalition have been created just after the first COVID crisis in March 2020, and it's something that I haven't seen anywhere else in the world. And we are actually gathering every week now with all these pharma companies to finance startups to be able to deliver services to the hospitals and to patients. And it's been working quite well. We have been funding more than 2.5 million euros for 18 projects so far, for 40 hospitals, and that reach 60,000 patients in every kind of patient care. It can be support to patients, education of healthcare professionals, how to improve the organization of healthcare institutions, or telemonitoring of patients. So this is a new trend I can see. I've been working more than 5 years in the pharma industry. I never saw that. Normally, the different pharma companies are keeping secret things. They don't work together, but it's the first time that all these stakeholders here, and you can see big brand names, are working together. And this is not complete because we have Eli Lilly that is just joining us. We have Novartis that just joined us as well. We have Norgine, it's pharma companies based in UK that join us. We have Chugai that also join us. We have other main and huge hospitals and patient advocacy groups that join us to be able to finance innovation. So basically how it works is that every 6 months, all these people are deciding what calls of projects we want to run. Call of projects can be very broad. It can be in diagnosis, it can be how to digitize clinical trials or anything. And then we have hundreds of startups that are applying, and we have selection committees that run every week, and then finance committees that when the startup passed the selection committee, then they can be financed by the pharma companies to run their project. They have been presenting in these calls. And this is shortly what I wanted to present to you, because I didn't see that anywhere else in the world, and it's really doing something great for the pharma industry in Europe. And last but not least, we have another project that is really crazy, is that we are creating the first pharma tech venture fund that is run by different pharma companies. We call it Pharma Tech Venture. And instead of actually financing the projects by usual business contracts, the pharma companies will pay 50,000 euros, for example, for a startup to do their projects. But then when it's finished, or when the press release have been released, then the pharma companies is no more interested, oftentimes, is what I experience. And now, because we want the pharma companies really involved and are committed to the success of digital health and innovation in pharma, we thought about taking equity in those startups. Instead of just financing the startups and giving money, we give the same amount of money, but we take some equity of the startups. So the pharma companies that are combined into this new VC fund are actually taking some shares of the different startups, and they are really committed to the long-term success of them. And this changed everything. This changed the mindset. This changed the way pharma companies finance innovation usually. And we have great hopes that we can have startups that can raise and develop internationally from that. All right, so I think my 8 minutes are gone. Here are the contacts anyway, even my phone number. Okay, it was quite short, but would be pleased to answer some questions we have here. So I don't know, Vlada, if we have some time for questions.
Thank you very much, Vincent, for your presentation about this open innovation approach and sharing with us the both also digital Pharma Digital Lab and also Health Innovation Coalition. we have a few questions, but also I would like to ask our other speakers who are still present to perhaps join this discussion, as we will have some 10 to 15 minutes for some additional questions and answers from the audience. Also, our participants, if you have any questions, please write them to the Q&A, or you can also raise your hand and you can join this conversation, so we can make it more interactive. There is a question for you, Vincent. Who would release the final product? Normally require a QP, qualified person, to release medicines, I believe.
Wow, but the final product, I don't know if it's a question for me, but
I believe yes.
Yeah, in the case of the different projects, mostly the startup. So the pharma companies have an idea, and they look for the best startups to develop something together based on the expertise of the startup, right? And at the end, the pharma company gives everything they can, the network, the expertise, some money, of course, so as to develop this new business together with the startups. But at the end, it's the startup that release the products. And if the pharma company is happy of it, then she can buy the company or have another kind of contracting, like like licensing or taking equity as well. But for all the projects we have, is the startup that is responsible for delivering and the final projects, helped by the pharma companies in the release.
Okay, then we have a question also focused on digital therapeutics. So perhaps also Alessandro could speak on this question. So how can we be reassured that the data from digital therapeutics will not be used as leverage to decrease the accessibility to work environments, increase the cost of insurance and lifestyle in general? And how can we be sure that our privacy is guarded and guaranteed? So I don't know, guys, you are working with digital therapeutics, so perhaps
yes, no, of course, this is a very interesting question. As of course, there are local regulations that protect the misuse of the data that are gathered for purposes, medical purposes. Of course, the risk is there, as of course these are data gathering machines, these digital therapeutics. So everybody would like to look into it. Just for information, of course, if we connect to this digital therapeutics a mobile sensor, we are gathering millions and millions of data from the patients. Of course, regulators should protect the data and give a clear indication how not to misuse them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Also, maybe Vincent, if you would like to discuss this as well.
Sorry, because I just saw I was sharing my screen. So
okay, it's not a problem. Okay, so we can go through the other questions from our audience. So Atheer had many questions related to the 3D printing of medicine. So we could go through this few of these questions, of course. So perhaps you could answer the question when it comes to the quality checks. What quality checks are performed on the polypill to make sure the correct dosage?
Right. So as I mentioned at one point, is that a lot of the printers are not made for pharmaceutical use. So now the new printers that are being developed for such use are integrating these QC control measures within the printers themselves. So, for example, portable NIR could be used to determine the drug content during the printing process. There are balance that are used to check the weights of the tablets. So the idea is that you're not going to perform any sort of destructive QC measures, because at the end of the day, you are printing on demand. You're not printing large batches, so you can't sacrifice a lot of these printlets. So you'd have to do it as part of the whole process.
Okay, thank you. Also, participants were asking about how to avoid the drug interactions in the drug layer.
Right. So in terms of interactions, that will differ if we're talking about a physical interaction or a chemical interaction. Now, in terms of the physical interaction, because the process is done in a layer by layer manner, you can simply just put an inner layer in between the two different drugs that physically separates them. Now, in terms of a chemical interaction, obviously, if the two drugs chemically interact, even individually, you're not going to administer them together to begin with. But if they are intended to give actions at different times or different regions in the body, then you can simply enclose one of them in a chamber that causes a delay in its release, whilst the other drug gives its action during that time.
Thank you. And the question about adverse events. How is adverse event reporting possible if one section of a combination pill is causing a side effect? How to identify which drug is causing the side effect?
Right. I think people are looking at it from a different angle. So if we're creating these polypills, originally those drugs were supposed to be administered together to begin with. What we're doing is just we're combining them in a single dosage one, so the patients don't have to take 6 or 7 different pills separately. So it's the same way of identifying if an interaction happens if the drugs are administered individually. So you'd have to find the underlying cause. So possibly try to administer them separately and try to identify which one of them is causing the interaction before giving them as a polypill.
Also, Giorgio is asking, related to 3D printing in space, are there any other types of applications excluding the one that have been already mentioned?
You mean in printing in space in particular?
Yes, he's asking this.
Yeah, outside of pharmacy, obviously there are other applications. They're being used a lot to print tools because these astronauts are obviously in space, so they don't have access to everything. They could be used to print food, for example. There are 3D printers for food as well. So,
thank you. Also, there is a question for Alessandro. How can it be ensured that a virtual doctor prescribing drugs to a patient is qualified and licensed?
Well, in my opinion, there should not be any virtual doctor prescribing medicine to patients. I mean, I'm not expecting this. If I mean, usually the virtual assistant in a digital medicine service usually provide information that have been previously validated by a medical doctor. Is not taking decision on behalf of.
Thank you. Also, Jessica Lang was asking, what is the regulatory pathway for printlets? It's focused on Atheer. So I believe you also answered this question in written, but perhaps you could also answer this.
Right. So at the end of the day, these are like any other medicines. We're not producing the medicine from scratch. And we have been in contact with several regulatory bodies. So the idea is that we just need to prove that these printers do adhere to GMP requirements and that the final product does meet the QC control measures that are proposed by the FDA. So that's it.
Thank you. Also, I would like to ask to all of you, dear presenters, what is your opinion? How will look like the health in a few years, perhaps in 2030? What is the future of healthcare, of pharma? For example, the historian and bestseller writer Harari, he is saying that perhaps there won't be any physicians actually needed because everything will be replaced by artificial intelligence and all these digital tools. So perhaps what is your opinion on this? How do you think it will really look like in a few years? I don't know who could talk about this, perhaps Malika or Vincent.
Just one word, yeah. I don't think, I don't believe it's necessary nor desirable that technology replace everything in human. We can already see with this COVID crisis that we are losing a lot of things when we only do things in digital and when we you know, there's something that until now, I don't think machines can copy in human. And I think physicians will still be there. Of course, the job will be really transformed, and they will be helped by technologies that we can see today in anatomopathology when they need to grade the different cancer states of, you know, breast cancer, for example. You have different startups and technology that can help to grade that, and they are doing a really great job. But I really don't think it will be completely replaced. I think technology will be here and still finding the way to improve how we are working. Like this Move Care application, I don't know if you heard about it, but it's something very simple with SMS, short text messages. And just following it, improve the patient and physician's interaction so that the physician can take earlier meetings with the patient when the algorithm think that the patient is going wrong or is making a metastasis, for example, given some symptoms. So I think it will help doing the job better. It will maybe replace some tasks, but it will not replace the art of medicine, which is deeply human.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, in mental health, it's almost the opposite, I would say. I think right now, very few people are seeing humans, or, you know, less people than the amount of people who need it. And I think really the impact of digital tools will be to bring more people to see humans and have this kind of first step to taking care of their mental health. And obviously for the mental health aspect, a huge part of being mentally healthy and improving one's mental health is that human interaction, that feeling of being supported and being understood. And at the end of the day, for a lot of people, that requires a human at some point.
Thank you very much. So if there are no other questions from our audience, I don't know if you would like to add something, dear speakers. Here's the space for you. Also, this is the space for our participants. So I would like to thank to all the speakers, of course, firstly for your great presentations, also to our participants on Zoom, also on our YouTube channel. I hope it was interesting for you and that you have learned something new. Also, please do not forget to follow us on LinkedIn, also on our other social media, and you can give us a feedback on our LinkedIn event group. Please stay tuned. We will organize other pharmaceutical events in the future, and I believe that we will meet there again. Thank you very much, and see you on our future webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and
Thank
you for all attendees, and Nela, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.